Joe Rogan Podcast. Check it out.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
Train by day, Joe Rogan Podcast by night, all day.
So what possessed you to write a book about getting hammered?
That's a really good question. Like, my colleagues are flabbergasted when they see the topic. So my day job's early Chinese philosophy, and I do comparative religion, and then I'm writing this book on alcohol. It grows organically out of work I've done before. So my specialty is early Chinese philosophy. My early work focused on this idea in early China of what I translated as effortless action. The word is wu wei. It literally means no doing or not trying, but it's a spontaneous state. It's kind of like being in the zone in sport. So it's a state where you lose a sense of yourself as an agent. You feel like everything's just happening. You're not making any effort, and yet everything works perfectly. You solve problems. People like you. Everything works out. And the early Chinese thinkers want to get you into this state of wu wei. But they have this problem that I call the paradox of wu wei, which is, how do you try not to try? You want to be spontaneous. You're not being spontaneous. How do you get from A to B? And all of what I argue in my dissertation is that all of early Chinese philosophy is this series of attempts to solve the paradox. And no one does it because it's a genuine paradox. And so I revisit my first general audience book is called Trying Not to Try, and it's about this tension. And I walk people through the various strategies that the early Chinese came up with. But none of them really can be 100% effective, because what's happening when you're trying not to try, cognitively, you're activating the part of your brain that you want to shut down. Dan Wegner, the social psychologist, talked about what he called the white bear problem. So if I say, don't think of a white bear, you think of a white bear, because I've just activated that concept in your brain. If you're a stand-up comedian and you're choking, like everything's falling flat, the audience is turning ugly, you're getting nervous, and part of your brain's like, just relax, just do your stuff, be funny. How do you be funny if you're not feeling funny? How do you force yourself to do that? And so this is a real tension, and that's what my previous work focused on. But there's a story in one of these texts, this Taoist text, where Zhuangzi, this early Taoist thinker, compares the person who's in wu wei to someone who's drunk. They kind of lose a sense of self. They're relaxed. They can bump into things and not harm themselves. And it's clear that in that text, it's just a metaphor for the spiritual state Zhuangzi wants you to get into. But I think that story made me start thinking about how cultures might use alcohol as a technology for getting around this paradox of wu wei. You want to be spontaneous. You want to be relaxed. You want to just be loose, but thinking about it's not going to get you there.
Yeah.
Alcohol is a way to kind of directly reach into your brain and just turn down your prefrontal cortex a little bit so you can relax. And so that's what started me thinking about alcohol as a cultural technology to enhance spontaneity.
And it has to be modulated correctly. That's the thing about alcohol, right? One of the things about alcohol is when you start drinking, the moment you start to lose your inhibitions, you also lose the inhibition to drink too much.
Yeah, no, that's a problem. So that's why alcohol is super dangerous. Especially that kind of alcohol. Distilled liquor is super dangerous.
Buffalo Trace. I feel like we should have a drink.
I think we would be remiss.
We have to.
I think we're professionally obligated
podcast
to drink. Yeah.
There we go.
That's nice.
If we're doing a podcast about drinking, it just
Yeah.
makes sense. We should have at least a small.
So historically, there's been a safety feature built into alcohol. So for most, we've been drinking. Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers. Yeah. Let's try this.
Whoa.
Yeah, that's nice.
That'll start your Monday morning
I'll
off.
start your Monday. There's a way to start a Monday morning. Yeah. So this stuff is new. So having
Really?
alcohol that's this strong is something we've only had for a couple hundred years.
Really?
Yeah. So a lot of people don't realize that. So for most of our history, we've been drinking like 2 to 3% beers.
2 to 3%.
Yeah, historically it's typically what beers came in at. Grape wines you could get up to like 8 to 10, but there's a built-in limit to natural fermentation. So the yeast are turning sugars into alcohol, which is a poison. So the yeast are slowly poisoning themselves, basically. And we've bred these super hardy yeast. So like nowadays you can get an Australian Syrah up to like 16% ABV.
Wow.
Which is high, historically really unprecedented. But
that's crazy.
That's as high as you can get because then the alcohol shuts down the yeast. But a way around that is distillation. So you take that wine, you heat it up. Ethanol is really volatile, so that comes off first. And if you could figure out how to capture that vapor and turn it back into a liquid, you've got this. You've got really concentrated alcohol.
Do they do that with wine?
They do it with wine, or they'll take something that's naturally fermented, so a weak beer or a wine, and then they distill it.
And what do they call that when they get it on the other end?
Distilled liquor. That's what liquor is.
Oh, okay. So it's just a kind of liquor?
Yeah.
Like
so liquor or spirits refers to something that's been distilled. So
Right.
you've basically extracted the alcohol out of the mixture and made it into a pure form. And once you do that, you've got like 90. You can get like some vodkas could be like 90-something% ABV. So that's crazy strong. It's just really, we're not equipped to. So what you're talking about, it needs to be modulated. It was always modulated historically by the fact that we were drinking beers that weren't very strong. So there's going to be just volume limit to how much you can consume. It's also modulated by social stuff. So we're drinking typically, historically, in a communal situation where there's really clear ritual restrictions on drinking. So you only drink when someone makes a toast. You're modulating your drinking with other people. And even, you think about just even in a pub, you don't just drink as much as you want. You order rounds.
Right.
And if you down your beer real fast, you got to wait until everyone else is ready to order another round. So we socially regulate our drinking, and then it's been regulated by its inherent weakness, if you want to think of it that way. But then all of a sudden you get this kind of stuff. You get really strong liquors, and you can have that in your house. That's when alcohol gets really dangerous.
And it's only been the last couple hundred years.
Yeah, distilled liquors weren't, because the concept's really simple. Aristotle described distillation, but technologically it's really hard to do because you have to have metallurgy. You need to be able to heat liquids and keep them at a certain temperature.
That makes sense.
They're pressurized. It's actually kind of dangerous. So in Prohibition, when people created stills at home, it was like early 20th century version of meth labs. They were constantly exploding, and people were like getting scalded with hot liquid because it's dangerous. So it's hard to do. So we only mastered it. I'm telling an evolutionary story. So my story begins 10 million years ago with primate ancestors who adapted to alcohol. And just so 10 million years ago, about 20,000 years ago to 13,000 years ago, we start making alcohol seriously, not just relying on fruit lying around that has some alcohol in it. And then distillation happens probably around 1300s in China and 1600s in Europe. So that sounds like a long time ago, but really, evolutionarily, it's yesterday. We really haven't had time culturally or genetically to adapt to access to this kind of alcohol.
And a long time ago, when people were drinking beer and drinking wine in particular, like a lot of what they were doing, like if they were carrying it around with them, they would carry beer or wine when they were going on trips because it didn't go bad the way water would, right?
Beer, unhopped beer, goes bad pretty quickly.
Like
a couple days, yeah. There's a theory that beer might have been useful in some cultures because fermenting water purifies the water.
So if you got bad water from a pond or something like that, and then you ferment it and make beer out of it.
Yeah.
Can drink it.
So that's one of the stories. The purpose of my book is to try to explain the puzzle of why we do this. Why do we put poisons into our body? Why do we like to drink? And it's mysterious because it's really costly. It's damaging physiologically. It's got all these potential social problems. And yet we've been doing it forever. We've been making and drinking alcohol for just about as long as we've been doing anything in an organized fashion. In fact, it's looking likely that we were doing this before agriculture, and that it's possible that the desire to make beer and wine is what motivated agriculture. So hunter-gatherers were making beer before they had agriculture.
Really?
Yeah. And
So they're making in clay pots and
yeah, there's they're pounding the stuff, they're malting it to up the sugar content. I think that's the effect of that, and then they're fermenting it. And so we have these sites like in what's present day Turkey, the site called Gobekli Tepe, is this really cool ritual site. It's these huge stone. Yeah. Have you seen pictures of it?
Yeah, I'm super familiar with it because of Graham Hancock, who's been on my podcast multiple times.
Okay.
And he's obsessed with ancient civilizations, and that is sort of the Rosetta Stone of ancient civilizations because it's at least 12,000 years old, and the thought process was at that point in time no one could build the kind of structures that those people built. So when they did it, it sort of it lent credence to some of his theories that civilization has gone through multiple periods of ascension and then resets, usually through catastrophic disasters like asteroid impacts. So his theory, it's not really just his theory. It's the Younger Dryas impact theory.
Okay.
And the Younger Dryas impact theory, it's pointing to the end of the Ice Age, which coincides with real proof of impacts on Earth in the sense of they take soil samples, and when they go down to the same amount of time where the Ice Age ended, they find what this stuff called it's called nuclear glass or tritonite, and this stuff it occurs at blast sites where they test nuclear weapons, but it also occurs at asteroid impact sites.
Okay.
And they find it all over the place at around 12,000-ish years ago. And so this theory is that at the end of the Ice Age, what had happened was we passed through an area in our solar system that is rich with comets.
Okay.
And then we were hit. And that it literally restarted civilization, killed off a massive amount of people, and stopped civilizations dead in its tracks. And then there's a period of rebuilding.
So is Gobekli Tepe is the rebuilding?
No, they don't know, right? It's all speculation because Gobekli Tepe was for sure covered on purpose somewhere around 12,000 years ago. Yeah. But that doesn't indicate how long ago before then it was built.
Right.
But what they do know is it was made with some pretty sophisticated methods because a lot of the carvings were three-dimensional. Instead of carved into the stone around it was carved away
right.
to leave. And there's also like animals in it that aren't even supposed to be from that part of the world.
Okay.
So they find that pretty fascinating.
I didn't know about that.
Yeah, there's some pretty cool shit to it. And it's huge. They've only uncovered, I think, like 10% of it so far.
It's a cool site. So the role it plays in my story is that they're hunter-gatherers, the people who built this place.
They used to think that, but they're not necessarily sure of that. This is the theory that Graham Hancock is proposing.
All right.
He believes that civilization predates that.
So they were they had full-on agriculture, and they were...
This is just completely theoretical, right? Because and very disputed.
Okay. Because
you're dealing with... it's like so long ago. It's hard. Like, what evidence is there? And this was always the evidence against something like Gobekli Tepe.
Yeah.
Where's the evidence of sophisticated structures 12,000 years ago?
Yeah.
And then finally, they found Gobekli Tepe. So now they're like, okay, well, now we have evidence of sophisticated structures 12,000 years ago, which should have been built according to our timeline by hunter-gatherers. But they're resisting that, and they're thinking this Younger Dryas impact theory may indicate that there was something that happened that, if you look at Egypt, there's clearly more than one era of building styles. Mm-hmm. There's like an old kingdom style, and a lot of the old stuff is like deep under the sand when they're finding it. And it's their position that a lot of this stuff is thousands of years older than the pyramids.
Okay. So my understanding of the site is that
it's a hunter-gatherer.
It was hunter-gatherers. There's no grain storage locations. They were clearly gathering. They were coming from all over, and they were gathering at this site to build. So they were working to erect these pillars and stuff, and they were having blowout feasts. So they have all these remnants of feasting, and they have these big vats that almost certainly contained beer and possibly hallucinogen-laced beer. So a lot of early.
And so these hunter-gatherers, they weren't growing the hops or whatever they made the beer out of. They were just finding it wild.
They're making it out of wild grains. But the argument, so the standard story about alcohol is we invent agriculture. Then sometime after that, we note that, someone leaves their sourdough starter out too long and it starts to turn into beer, and they're like, oh, this actually tastes all right. That's the standard story. So we had agriculture, and then we get alcohol. Around the 1950s or so, some archaeologists started to argue, sites like this one and other sites around the world suggest that hunter-gatherers were gathering and making alcohol before agriculture. And so this is the beer before bread hypothesis.
That's crazy.
Is that what motivated people to settle down and start focusing on making these grains more productive? Was they wanted to get high, not because they wanted to make bread. And it jives. You see the same pattern in other parts of the world. So in South America, they make this beer-like substance, chicha, now they make it out of maize, out of corn. But they used to make it out of the wild ancestor of corn is called teosinte. And what's interesting is teosinte sucks for making grain. Like if your goal was to make tortillas, you wouldn't even notice this plant because the grains don't make very good grain products to eat. But it makes great beer. It's really good for making chicha. So this plant, if these early people were looking for something to make food with, they would overlook this plant. But if they were looking for something to make beer with, they would focus on it, cultivate it, start making it produce bigger grains, and that's how you would get corn.
That's like, what was do we know what the original thing that they got high with was? Do we have the first, the atom?
The atom. Yeah, I mean, certainly we were getting a little bit drunk on just naturally fermenting fruit. So, if fruit falls on the ground, it starts to rot. What the rotting is some of it's being turned into alcohol by yeast. And so it's easy to discover alcohol because it's happening naturally in our environment all the time. The earliest evidence of deliberately produced alcohol is from about 13,000 years ago, so a little bit before Gobekli Tepe. And this is in modern-day Israel. They have traces of beer production, so people were clearly fermenting beer.
Are you aware of Brian Murarescu's work?
No.
He wrote a book called The Immortality Key, and it's all about ancient Greece and the Eleusinian mysteries.
Okay.
And he has proven through examination of these vessels that they used to carry their wine in that the wine was laced with ergot. Yeah. So they were tripping balls.
I have heard about this theory, yeah.
They were adding psychedelic compounds to their wine. So they were doing these things where they would have these ceremonies where everybody would get together and they would, and this is where they figured out democracy. They solved
right.
a lot
you
of
get
the
a lot of
problems.
new ideas when you're doing hallucinogens. That's very common. So in Europe, a lot of the beers were clearly mixed with hallucinogens.
Yeah, he talks about beer as well.
And I think the Golden Triangle, it's called, this region in Turkey, around 12,000 years ago, there's a carving from a site near Gobekli Tepe that has a picture. It's a carving of a human dancing with these two dancing turtles.
Wow.
And it's hard to imagine seeing that on 2 to 3% near beer. Like there's got to be something else going on.
Right.
And so I think it's likely that they were lacing their beer with hallucinogens. It's really a common thing to do.
Well, they were all probably eating mushrooms too, right?
And they're possibly eating mushrooms as well, yeah.
Why turtles? I wonder why. Is that like that? Look at this.
Oh, yeah, there it is. Yeah, that's great.
Oh,
yeah.
Dude's dancing with turtles.
So does that look like people on 2 to 3% beer? It doesn't.
That looks like something my kid would make when she was 4.
Okay. And so what intoxicants are doing to you is returning you to a state of a 4-year-old. So,
do we know how old this is supposed to be?
That's around it's around, I think, 12,000 years ago.
Now, when did they, what's that wacky theory that the Earth is suspended by turtles? It's turtles all the way down.
It's on the back of turtles all the way down. Yeah. I don't know if they had a mythology like that.
So that's interesting. Like, go back and look at right there. Scroll down, Jamie. Down. No.
Other way.
Yeah. That that image off the with the cat. Yeah, right there. That's one of those Gobekli Tepe things. It's a 3-dimensional image that's
cool.
Carved into the stone, or taking the stone all around it to leave it there. That's super sophisticated stuff for 12,000 years ago.
Yeah. So my argument is this is why people settled down originally. I mean, so civilization comes from intoxication. Hunter-gatherers who were living in these small bands, wandering around, were motivated to come together and settle down and start getting organized about growing stuff because they wanted to produce the stuff that was going to mess them up so they could have these kind of ceremonies.
I guess that makes sense if you think about like their everyday existence being like very difficult, right? You're just trying to find food, you get food, you eat it, you try to keep neighboring tribes from coming in and stealing that food, and then you bond through these hallucinogenic experiences or these alcohol experiences or any altered state, right?
Well, so it's doing a lot of different things for you. It's helping with creativity. So one of the functions of alcohol and hallucinogens is you mentioned 4-year-olds. So there's good work on creativity and development by Alison Gopnik, who's a child psychologist child developmental psychologist at Berkeley. And she's got this great task where you have to figure out this really counterintuitive problem. And she's got a graph that I reproduce in the book of how people do on it as they age. And so 4-year-olds are awesome at it. They solve it right away. And it just goes down in a line until adults are really bad at it. And what I do in the book is lay that on top of a chart showing the development of the prefrontal cortex. So this part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, is really important. It's in charge of self-control, cognitive control, executive function. It's what allows you to stay focused on a task. It's what allows you to not meander in a conversation and actually stay focused on what you're talking about. But it's an enemy of creativity, for one thing. So it seems to interfere with your ability to think out of the box or think laterally.
Doesn't this also coincide, though, with responsibilities in life?
Yeah.
Like the timeline?
Well, it's the other. I mean, in a way, it's the other way around. So you get more responsibilities because you can handle them because you actually have a prefrontal cortex.
But is that really what's going on, or is it just that you actually have a family and you have to feed them, and then you have these primal responsibilities that sort of rise up that force you to think much more pragmatically? I mean, what came first, the chicken or the egg, right?
I think they're happening. They're co-happening. So it's developing the way it's developing because evolution has a problem it needs to solve. The prefrontal cortex is the enemy of spontaneity. It's the enemy of creativity. It's the enemy of kind of childlike trust. You know, you see kids just walk up to a stranger in the airport and be like, "Hey, do you want to meet my stuffed animal?" You know, kids are just, they're open, right? That's a good trait for some things. But kids also can't tie their frickin' shoes and get to school in the morning, right? So there's this tension. Evolution wants us to be able to take care of our families and do our jobs and get food. And so its solution, essentially, is to give us this really extended childhood. So we have this long period where we're just gradually building our prefrontal cortex. And that allows us to be open, to make ties to other people, to learn from our culture, to learn language. We have all these skills we need to learn. And then right around kind of mid-20s, like 24, 25, is when you finally finish developing your PFC. And that's around the time when you have to start being hyper-responsible. And so it seems like a good solution for evolution to do that. The problem is once you've got that fully developed PFC, you've lost a lot of these childlike traits. So you've lost your ability to trust people implicitly. You've lost your ability to be creative, as Gopnik's work shows. And so it would be awesome if you could be a grown-up and have a PFC and be able to get to work on time and do everything you need to do. But you had a way to temporarily be like a child again for a few hours. And this is how you do it, right? It's basically a cultural technology for temporarily turning down your prefrontal cortex so you can be like a 4-year-old for a little bit.
That explains comedians.
I mean, it's central to comedy. I mean, it's got to be the case. You must use alcohol in writing.
Yeah, I like a little bit of alcohol and a little bit of marijuana mixed together. It's good for writing. It's also good for performing. You know, it's like don't give a fuck sauce. You just go out there and be loose.
So you do that before you go out?
Yeah, I like to have a shot and smoke a little weed.
Yeah. The first time I ever lectured to a big crowd, I was a grad student, and I had to cover for my professor and lecture to like 150 people in this auditorium. It just scared the shit out of me. And I was a waiter. I worked in the service industry in San Francisco, and I was finishing up a shift, having a drink at the bar with a bartender. and told him, yeah, I got to go do this lecture tomorrow. I'm really nervous about it. And he was like, dude, bring a flask and do a shot before you go out there. And I was like, it's 10:30 in the morning. And he was like, no, it doesn't matter. Just do it. And I'm dating myself here. You're old enough to remember this. Remember with film photography, you had those little plastic things you put film in? I filled one of those with vodka and put it in my backpack. And right before I went out, I did a shot of vodka. And just as I was starting the lecture, that's the hardest part. Like you stand up there, 150 people, they get quiet, they all look at you, and you need to start talking and saying something that's compelling. That's usually when you choke and freeze up. But right around that time, the vodka was hitting my brain, and I was like, this kind of mellow relaxation was spreading through my body. And it got me through that initial nervousness until, by the time it started to wear off, I was into my lecture. I knew the material. It was just getting over that hump. And so people use alcohol in this way, right? To get over stage fright, to get over, this is why people have drinks on first dates, right? You're meeting someone, it's a little awkward. You want to be relaxed and funny, but how do you try to be relaxed and funny?
Yeah.
A couple drinks helps with that, right? It relaxes, turns down the prefrontal cortex. Alcohol is doing a lot of things at the same time. It's turning down your prefrontal cortex. It's making you feel better, so it's boosting serotonin and endorphins. It's making you feel, people who are drunk think they're more attractive, and they see other people as more attractive. So the beer goggles thing is true. You actually rate other people as more attractive when you're a little bit drunk. You're feeling connected with them. So there's actually some good experimental evidence that you get people drinking together in small groups, and they just start to like each other more and feel like, oh, we're really a team, and I like these people I'm hanging out with. So it's a tool for we're primates. Our nature is to be kind of selfish and suspicious and hostile. Like I've never met either of you guys, and if we were chimpanzees and someone just threw 3 chimpanzees into a room together, one of us would walk out maybe, and there'd just be blood left. We would tear each other apart.
Yeah.
But humans solve this problem all the time. I sat on an airplane coming here with a whole bunch of other people. We all sat in our seats, behaved ourselves. So
must not have been a Southwest flight.
It was a Southwest flight. Yeah, no, it wasn't. Thank God. How do you get primates? So the way we cooperate in large-scale societies, we look more like social insects. We look more like kind of ants or bees, and yet we're not ants or bees. We're primates, and so there's this trick of getting primates to cooperate in this ultra cooperative way, and the argument in the book is alcohol is one of the tools we've used to do that.
What do you say about sober people that are also very cooperative? What techniques are they using if they're not using alcohol?
There's a lot of ways you can get into these kind of states. So you can use exercise. You can use meditation. Meditation can do it. You can use breathing exercises, right? You can do extreme breathing. You can stay up all night. So religious traditions that, for various reasons, decide they don't want to use chemical intoxicants usually substitute some other way to do it.
I like that you said stay up all night because I used to be on this sitcom called News Radio, and the writers, they had that strategy. It was an amazing show because the writing was so good, but the way they wrote it was so nuts. They were a bunch of young, really smart guys who were kind of crazy, and they would stay up until like 4 o'clock in the morning playing video games and then start writing.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So sometimes we would show up, like maybe call time would be 9 or 10 a.m., and they were just done with like the first draft of scene 1.
Yeah.
You know, and we're like, what are you guys doing? Like they were all fucked up and their hair was a mess and they were barefoot.
Yeah.
They were animals. But it was a strategy.
Yeah.
The strategy was to get overtired and really, really silly. Yeah. And then they would come up with some of the most preposterous scenarios oddly enough, they weren't getting high. These people were getting high that way.
No, you can do it through sleep deprivation.
That's literally how they did it on purpose, which I'd never heard of before. But then once they told me about it, I was like, well, that does make sense because when I'm loopy, You know, if
Yeah.
like I'm hanging out with my friends and I've been up like and it's 4:00 in the morning, we just laugh at anything.
Yeah,
Like, you
and
get
you don't give a
fall
shit
down
anymore.
silly.
And that's the PFC being
Shut off.
Playground monitor is gone, and you don't care anymore.
Playground monitor. Interesting. Yeah.
You want to get rid of that playground monitor if you want certain types of things to happen.
Exercise. We were talking about that earlier. That seems to have some sort of an effect that's similar. Like that's where runner's high comes from, right?
Yeah. So extreme. Like if you're running, doing any kind of extreme exercise, at a certain point, your body is like, we don't need the prefrontal cortex. Prefrontal cortex is a really expensive organ. It's it's sucking up a lot of energy from your body. And so at a certain point, you're like, we don't need the prefrontal cortex anymore. So it gets turned down by your body because you need to send it to your lungs and your heart and your muscles.
So how do we know how much energy it's using specifically?
You can look at kind of fMRI studies. You get a sense of how much blood flow is going through the brain, let's say, and you get a sense. It's a proxy then for how much energy it's using because that blood's delivering nutrients to it, right?
Oh, so they've done fMRIs on people that are really tired and loopy, and you can see it shut off?
Yeah, so that's interesting. I'm trying to think. The guy who's done work on runner's high is called Arne Dietrich. And I'm trying to remember now if he was I don't know how he would get people, maybe he would stress them physiologically and then stick them in an fMRI machine. But he talks about what he calls hypofrontality. So it's a state where your prefrontal cortex is shutting down in response to physiological stress. And I don't remember now how he was getting that measurement.
Me and my friends a few years back did this. We do this thing every year. We do Sober October. So the whole month of October, we don't do anything. No drinking, no booze.
No drugs at all.
No drugs at all. We're allowed to smoke cigars, though, which me and Ari both agree is kind of cheating.
It's kind of cheating.
It's kind of cheating, but not enough that it's...
Can you drink caffeine?
Yes, you're allowed to drink coffee.
All right.
You just can't get fucked up.
All right.
Which, as a comedian,
yeah, that's hard.
It's normal. It's not hard.
Okay.
It's really. But here's the point. One year we had a fitness challenge, and when we had this fitness challenge, we were using this thing called MyZone. It's a heart strap that works with an app, and it measures how much time you are in what percentage of your max heart rate. So how much time you are at 80% max heart rate, it puts you in the yellow zone, and then you rack up points for every minute that you're in this state. And we did this competition where we were competing against each other. So like I would wake up in the morning and I'd be like, shit, Ari got 600 points last night, and oh my God, Bert got 600
that
points too.
That must be really motivating.
Yeah, it was crazy. So we were just like all day. Like one day I did 7 hours of cardio in a day. It was crazy.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I just decided to just bury everybody. I watched all these movies, but the point is that the feeling that you get when you do that is incredible in terms like how much you don't give a fuck. Mm-hmm. You're so relaxed and calm. And my friend Tom Segura was saying the same thing. He's like, man, it cuts all the chatter down when you do that.
Yeah, you want to get rid of the chatter.
But it cuts it all down where you're like really calm. And I was always trying to figure out, like, is it because you're so tired that you don't have time for nonsense? For like, is your brain... Like, are you occupying your mind with nonsensical concerns and worries and anxiety? Is that a function of the fact that you don't have enough real threat and real struggle in your life? And is doing something that's incredibly physically struggling, like 7 hours on the elliptical machine, like that's so taxing that when it's over, your body doesn't have any time for any stupid nonsense.
Like
you know,
monitoring you. It doesn't want to monitor you anymore.
Yeah, you're not worrying about it like an email that you sent. Was that the wrong tone? Like, you know what I mean? Like, you know the kind
of
things
that person at the store, was I
dude, if I don't work out for a few days, I second guess everything that I do.
No, I get crazy too. I've gotten... I wrestled in high school and just got in the habit of weightlifting as a wrestler. And if I don't do it, I get really weird. Like I get really cranky. And it's true, I start thinking too much.
Yeah.
And I get the same, if I do a really good workout, I get that feeling of kind of not giving a fuck.
100%.
That's
100%.
really relaxing.
I wrestled in high school as well, but only one season. But what I did do for many years is jiu-jitsu, and still do. And jiu-jitsu gives me that feeling.
Yeah.
Jiu-jitsu, when I'm done with a hard jiu-jitsu session, first of all, I am so friendly. Like, I'm
You're
the
a super
friendliest
nice guy.
person.
Yeah,
I'm so friendly when I'm
and
done
you love
jiu-jitsu.
people, right?
I love everybody. I want to hug everybody.
Yeah.
I don't have any aggression in me.
Yeah.
And I wonder if it's the human. This is my theory, and obviously I haven't studied this, so these are just guesses. But without really understanding the whole neuroscience behind it, I've always felt like that the human body has certain physical requirements, and we don't meet those physical requirements. Your body starts coming up with problems that don't really exist. So it's like, if you don't have problems in your life, your body creates those problems for you. So the way I always like to point it out to people is like, I make my own problems.
Yeah.
They're
you
bullshit.
stress your body.
Yeah, they're not real. But like if one of the things I like to do is hit a bag, like hit a heavy bag, and I have one of them electronic timers. It syncs up with your phone, and I set it for like 15 3-minute rounds. And
I use that for
great.
sprinting. Yeah,
They're
so I
great.
do sprinting. Like I do like really intense sprinting on the treadmill. I hate running. Like long distance running is boring as hell, but sprinting is awesome.
Long distance running is boring as hell, but if you can do cardio in front of a TV, this is the secret. Ari Shaffir figured this out when we were doing the Sober October thing.
All right.
He's like, watch movies. You watch movies, and 2 hours is gone before you know it. If it's like a really good movie,
Right.
because like especially if you have headsets on, it's because you're like completely engulfed in the film and you're watching it, and you
Right.
barely even realize.
But you get the same effect by sprinting really hard for
Oh,
like
yeah, no,
20
for sure.
minutes, and I'd rather just do that.
Oh yeah, listen, I'm a big fan of Tabatas.
Yeah, that's what I use.
Yeah,
That's what I use.
I
Yeah,
love
yeah,
those.
yeah.
Those are great.
Yeah.
That's a great way to build real usable cardio too.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it's amazing. But the point about distracting the mind with something else while you're doing it that's what music does, right? If you hear a great song while you're running, I swear you can run faster.
Oh no, absolutely.
Right?
I have special music that I actually only use it for workout because I don't want to fuck it up. I don't want to. You don't want to waste it, right? Because if you listen to it and you're not working out, you get used to it, and it's kind of not as. So I save it. I have special music that I only allow myself to listen to when I'm working out. So
Yeah, well, I'm lucky that I have a lot of music like that. I don't have to worry about wearing it
running out of it.
But there's some songs like Ozzy Osbourne, like Crazy Train.
Crazy Train.
There's something
classic,
about that song, and any Wu-Tang Clan song.
Yeah.
There's something about that.
So music's doing that too, right? It's taking you.
Yeah.
So there's a Greek term. So the word ecstasy comes from Greek ekstasis, getting out of yourself. And there's something humans crave it. Humans really like the experience of getting out of their own heads.
Yeah.
And either getting absorbed into something bigger than them or just almost oblivion, right, where you're not thinking about anything. And it's beyond the just functional. So I'm arguing in the book that intoxication has all these social functions. So it makes us more creative, it makes us more trusting, helps us to solve these cooperation dilemmas, which is why people who, I want to make a treaty with you or I want to sign a business deal, I'm not going to just talk to you on the phone. I'm going to come to where you are in person and we're going to drink, and only then am I going to trust you. So people use alcohol that way. But there are lots of other ways to do it, and you can use music, you can use dance. But compare it. You're talking about the treadmill. Do a treadmill for 12 hours. That works. Staying up, religious traditions that have you stay up all night dancing and singing hymns. That's another way to do it. But you could also just sit in a really comfortable chair and drink this. And so there's a reason people use alcohol, because it's just easy. It's just a hassle doing it other ways. And so there's something to this chemical path that's always been appealing for people.
Terence McKenna had a great story that he would tell about this monk who practiced a city of levitation for decades. So you know what that is? It's like a meditation. Like he was concentrating on levitating, and so he practiced this for decades. And then the Buddha came to town, and he said, "I have practiced a city of levitation, and now I can walk on water." And the Buddha says, "Yeah, but the ferry's only a nickel."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there you go. And they serve beer on the ferry. So why don't you just fucking do that?
But that has always been the argument about enlightenment. Like you can you achieve enlightenment through meditation and all these different things? Yes, whatever enlightenment means. You can achieve a state of elevated consciousness. Let's put it that way, because the term enlightenment to me always it always sounded like you're done.
Yeah.
Right. I don't think you're done.
No, you're not done. But you can get into an altered state.
Yeah.
Through meditation.
An elevated level of consciousness. that can be achieved. But there's ways to help that along, and you can help that along. There's stuff that people have figured out. You know, it's like you don't have to chop a tree with a knife. You know, they figure out axes and saws, and the reason why is because they're like, hey, something's got to be better than this fucking knife.
Yeah,
this tree's huge. I've been working on it for a month. You know.
Yeah, and so you mix in a little bit of alcohol to a lot of these other things, and they work better.
Yeah.
So religious traditions use intoxicants. They're doing the dancing and the singing and all that stuff.
Right.
They're moving in synchrony. They're chanting. All that's great, but they're also slowly turning down their prefrontal cortex with chemicals.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I mean, this is one of the arguments I have in the book is that we've ignored this function because there's this kind of weird puritanical discomfort with chemical intoxication. So,
what do you think that comes from?
I don't know. It's this weird kind of distrust of pleasure that baffles me. But
I have a theory on that.
Yeah, what's your theory?
I think it comes from the idea that some people are not going to chip in and do the work that needs to be done, because if you're in a tribe of 150 people or so, everyone has a crucial role. And if you're a person that likes to lay around and get drunk and fuck off, you're not going to be the person that gets up and gathers food or hunts the food. And you're going to be a non-contributor, or you're not going to contribute your part. So we think of people that engage in these frivolous activities, not just normal, like, you know, not ritual things where everybody does it together, but normal frivolous activity, like it's a part of a normal everyday life for you. You're not going to be as productive.
Yeah, it's also, I mean, getting intoxicated alone is historically really weird. We've never done that. We always do it in
George
groups.
Thorogood song.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's the reason that's so effective is because it's weird, right?
Yeah.
So I drink alone. This is the guy who also wrote Bad to the Bone, right?
Yeah.
It's if you drink alone, there's something a little bit off about
with
you.
nobody
else, right? It's weird. People are suspicious of that. Cultures are suspicious of people who drink alone. So we always do it in company with others. But I think part of the reason we're suspicious of pleasure is mind-body dualism. So we have this kind of sense that if I want to get into a great state of mind, relaxed, open, friendly, loving people, if I do it through meditation, if I meditate for 10 hours and get there, everyone's like, that's awesome. That's a wonderful thing to do. Even if I do it through exercise, I feel like there's a sense that, okay, that's all right. But there's something about I think we have a feeling that using a chemical to directly change your brain is cheating. And so there's Eliade was this famous religious studies scholar who wrote a lot on mysticism. And he talks about these mystical states of ecstasy where people are feeling outside of themselves, no self, one with the universe. And he grudgingly admits at one point that, yeah, sure, some of them may have been using chemical substances, but that's just a vulgar way to attain spirituality. And it's this kind of prejudice against the body. The idea that you could be using chemicals to get to a state seems to us like cheating.
Well, it's kind of a foolish notion, right? Because everything is chemicals.
Everything is chemical.
All your food is essentially in some way or form. It's broken down to chemicals, or it's coming in as chemicals.
Yeah.
It's
like, not turtles all the way down. It's chemicals all the way down.
Your body's a chemical factory.
Yeah.
And that's the crazy thing about music, right? Like a great song, you hear Ozzy Osbourne, like if that's your jam, like your adrenaline rises.
Yeah.
Right? You get goosebumps. Sometimes you hear a song when you're on the radio and you're like, yeah. You hear that? And
yeah.
Not the radio. Who the fuck listens to
Who listens?
Jamie does, right?
Jamie
all day.
might. Jamie
AM.
might.
Only AM. Only AM
Yeah.
Political talk.
Yeah.
But
that's all physical, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
there's
Something
sound waves
happens.
that are being transmitted into your
Yeah.
ear that's making something vibrate, that's
drug.
sending signals. So it's
Great
all
music
drugs.
is a drug.
It's all drugs.
Yeah.
And so I have a quote from Aldous Huxley where he's talking about this prejudice, and he's, he said we have this, people look down at chemical means of attaining ecstasy, but it's chemicals all the way down. It's all chemicals. And so whether you do it through meditation or, breathing exercises or whatever, it's all physical.
I think our problem is by not acknowledging that, we don't recognize that there's not just strategies, but there's there's methods where you do it correctly. There's one of the good things about alcohol. Like we've had a drink, right? We had a drink, now we have a second drink. And we both know what that means.
We pacing ourselves, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
we're pacing ourselves.
All right.
Right now we're doing it.
Okay.
So,
All right.
but we both know how much that is. Like a drink of whiskey is, okay, that's one shot and this and that.
Yeah.
Okay, I know exactly. We're modulating correctly. And the thing about recognizing the correct dosages for all these different things is we have a roadmap. And that's one of the problems with the illegality of certain drugs.
Yeah.
And it's like it's always been a really big problem in Los Angeles with marijuana because it's the Wild West there. And
you never know what you're getting.
Right, especially with edibles.
Yeah. Oh, edibles are bad. So one of my arguments in the book is that I call alcohol the king of intoxicants. Mm-hmm. So there are other ways you could do it. You could do it with cannabis. You can do it with kava, which is this intoxicating drink they drink in the Pacific. What's special about alcohol is that it's easy to dose. Like you're saying, so it's easy to dose. You know how much you're getting.
Yeah.
The cognitive effects are similar across individuals. So it does kind of the same thing to different people. Whereas cannabis is really, like I've been, my whole life, I spent my 20s in San Francisco and everyone's smoking pot. When I smoke cannabis, I get briefly really paranoid. And then I get horny for about 2 minutes, and then I fall asleep.
Catch it in that 2 minutes.
If you catch me in those 2 minutes, I have a great time. But that's it. And then I fall asleep. All I want to do is go to sleep. And so and everyone's been like, oh, you haven't had sativa, you haven't had the right strain. It's bullshit. Like every strain of cannabis affects me that way.
Well, I definitely think there's biodiversity in terms of the way your body responds to cannabis. I've seen it.
Yeah.
And there's a guy, Alex Berenson. He was a writer for a journalist for the New York Times, and he wrote a book called Tell Your Children that's highly criticized by people that love cannabis. But I had him on with this guy, Mike Hart, who is a doctor from Canada who prescribed cannabis. And his take on it was by just pretending that cannabis does no harm, it doesn't do anybody any good, because some people have schizophrenic breaks while they're on cannabis. And I personally know of people that, especially with eating cannabis, have had schizophrenic breaks, and some people who smoked too much of it and smoked it all the time went nutty. I know multiple people where I could point to and I could say that guy was doing pretty good, and then he started smoking a lot of weed, and then he eventually got crazy.
Yeah.
That's real.
I have a friend who recently had a kind of breakdown psychotic.
Yeah, it's real.
One theory is he was just smoking too much pot.
And this is coming from a person who loves pot. Yeah. I'm a pot enthusiast, but I also have a lot of willpower. I'm really good at not doing something and stopping it.
Right.
Or if I thought that I was fucking up my life with pot, I would just I'd hit the brakes.
Yeah.
If I started not blowing off podcasts or canceling things and just sleeping and watching TV or
drinking
something
during work.
This is okay for my job.
For
my job, it actually enhances our conversation,
it does,
right?
Yeah.
Which leads to your book, right? But this guy, Alex Berenson, he's like a lot of people resisted that. And I was like, no, I think he's right.
Yeah.
I think he's right. And I think we need to be studying this because the fact that it has been a Schedule I drug for so long, our understanding of what it does to different people. Look, I love peanuts. I'm a big fan of peanuts. Some people, peanuts kills them.
Yeah.
Right? That's not me. But that doesn't mean that peanuts should be illegal.
Yeah.
We should understand what the fuck is going on. And the only way we understand what the fuck is going on is if we're honest about it.
Yeah.
And I think we have to be honest about the effects of cannabis because they're different with everybody else, with everybody rather, with different people. And for me, I'm okay with it. It doesn't bother me. But
what's the effect on you? What is it?
What depends on what I'm doing, right? It depends on if it's before bedtime. But I don't like it before bedtime because then I don't go to sleep.
See, that's weird. That's bizarre to me.
I'm a thinker.
The only thing it's good for is to make me go to sleep.
For me, when I'm high, I'm a thinker.
Okay.
I'm not a sleeper high. I'm a thinker high. I just go to sleep. I'm a good sleeper. I could go to sleep at a fucking train station. I could just lay down on the ground.
I hate people like you. Yeah.
I'm always tired. Because I'm always doing
You're
stuff.
always working out.
Yeah, I'm always working out. I'm always tired.
Yeah.
And I do like the little bit of meditation. But what I really like before sleeping is sauna. I like to go in the sauna.
Okay.
and get wrecked in the sauna. I like to do like 25 minutes in a sauna, and then I like to sleep.
So it relaxes your muscles?
Yeah, it relaxes you. It sends your body a lot of anti-inflammatory heat shock proteins, and it's difficult. And I like it that it's a struggle, and then after it's a struggle, I feel like I earned my rest, and then I go to sleep.
You're ready to go to sleep.
But cannabis, it depends on the dosage, and it really depends on if I eat it or smoke it. And I'm sure you know the difference.
Yeah,
between,
eating is weird.
Yeah, it produces. I had Rick Doblin on a couple days ago from MAPS, a multidisciplinary advanced studies of psychedelic substances. What is it? Multidisciplinary. Anyway, MAPS is an incredible organization that is working to make certain psychedelic compounds available to people for therapy and to particularly MDMA for people with PTSD, soldiers.
I've read some of the research on that.
Psilocybin as well for a lot of these different things. And Rick Doblin and I were talking about this the other day, that there's this thing that happens when you eat cannabis. It's processed by your liver and it produces 11-hydroxymetabolite, which is 5 times more psychoactive than THC.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so it really whacks people, and they don't think that it's pot. They think, oh my God, I got dosed, like something's wrong,
right.
because it really has a psychedelic effect.
Yeah, I've experienced that. The first time I had actually never smoked pot, and I moved to California. So I'm from Jersey originally, and then when I was about 20, I dropped out of college on the East Coast and rode my motorcycle to California and thought I was Jack
Look
Kerouac.
at you, bro.
Yeah, I was a dick. I was like such a self-righteous little dick. I was in the art of motorcycle maintenance.
Yeah.
It was not a good time for me, but it was good. It was a good move, and I moved into California, and I'd never done drugs before that, but I was out of my apartment in San Francisco and moving into a new one, and I rode my motorcycle north and did some camping, and then I got too cold, and so I ended up at this youth hostel, and someone who worked there introduced me to hash cooked into an omelet.
Yo.
And so I did it, I ate it, and I felt nothing. I was like, no, it's not affecting me. And then I had to go to class. So I was at Stanford. So this was happening up in Point Reyes National Park, like north of San Francisco. And I had to ride on my motorcycle down to school for class. And about halfway through the ride, I just started tripping. Like it felt like I was tripping. The trees started moving, and I was high for like 3 days. It was horrible. It just would not stop. I'd wake up the next day and I'm like, am I still high? I was like, yeah, still high. So the eating scares me because I had it's just an uncontrollable experience, and it lasts for so long.
You never know what you're getting. It's so inconsistent. And, these goddamn stoners, when they make that hemp butter, they make that stuff and they cook in the butter and then they add weed to the food too. Like, there was a restaurant, where was it? In Colorado? There was a restaurant that was making marijuana food. They're making food with marijuana.
So they're just cooking with cannabis infused
cooking with
cannabis.
And they were. That was part of the appeal of the place. I was like, Jesus Christ, it sounds
terrible. I would never fucking go there. That sounds like my worst nightmare, right?
It sounds so dangerous.
Yeah.
Because at least they have certain things. Like one of the things about the legalization that passed in 2016 in California is that they put limits on edibles. And so the limits on edibles are, I believe it's 10 milligrams.
Oh, how strong they give it?
Yeah, so you could buy a bunch, you could eat 10 of them and get 100. But the thing is, like, at 10 is like a good dose for a lot of folks. It's not that bad, unless you're Jamie. Jamie has this weird thing where he doesn't get high off edibles.
At all?
No, not at all. Like, he's taking 1,000 milligrams. I've seen it. It's bananas.
That's weird.
And apparently it is a thing. Just like some people die if they eat Brazil nuts, right?
Yeah. So this is the thing about cannabis and all these other drugs is none of them are as predictable as alcohol.
Right.
So alcohol is easy to make. You can make it out of anything. It's easy to dose. The results are consistent across individuals. Like what's happening to you right now as we drink this is similar to what's happening to me. We're not having completely opposite experiences, right?
Right.
And it's going to wear off. So we have dedicated machinery in our body that its job is to identify ethanol and get it the fuck out of our bodies as quickly as possible. And so the half-life is pretty low, is short. Like in 2 hours, we'll be fine.
But it's interesting that different cultures have almost like where if cultures traditionally don't have a use of alcohol as a part of their culture, they have lower tolerances.
They do.
And then individuals, for whatever reason, some individuals are like predestined to be alcoholics.
Yeah.
Which is really weird.
It's part of the puzzle I'm trying to explain. So the estimate is that up to 15% of the human population has a predisposition to alcoholism.
Wow.
So
That's really high.
It's really high. You can't use, if you have that you can't use alcohol safely. And so the question is, why has our taste for alcohol been allowed to stay in our gene pool for so long? And so one of those stories I tell is one possibility, the standard scientific story about why we like alcohol is it's a mistake. So it's a way we get a reward for no good reason. And so it's kind of an evolutionary hijack. And so it's similar to masturbation. So people can get reward. Pleasure is our genes' way of getting us to do what they want us to do. So they give us pleasure for things that advance their cause, and they give us pain for things that don't. And the best pleasure you could have as a human being is an orgasm. Everything else is compared to that. And it's because that's most directly associated with the thing the genes most want us to do, which is make copies and pass it on to the next generation. But it's not a perfect system because we can get orgasms in other ways, right? So we masturbate, we engage in all sorts of non-reproductive sex, but it works good enough because the cost of whatever else we're doing is minimal. The point is, over evolutionary history, statistically speaking, orgasms were associated with getting us to pass on genes to the next generation. And it's because the reason evolution can tolerate all the non-reproductive hijinks we get up to is because they're not costly. It's not imposing adaptive costs on us. In the case of alcohol, especially if you have a predisposition to alcoholism, it's imposing huge costs on you. And so evolution should be really interested in getting, our taste for alcohol should be eliminated from the human species if it really is only a costly mistake, if it's just kind of brain parasite. And so one possibility is, evolution just hasn't figured out a solution yet. And that's possible. Like selection can't work on a mutation that doesn't exist. But there's a gene complex that evolves separately at least 3 times at different points of history and around the world where people don't like to drink. And so I think people know of it, the most common prevalence of it is in East Asia. So some people from East Asia, if they had that first drink we had, like about halfway through that first drink, they would turn red, they would start to get heart palpitations, they would feel nauseous. That first drink you poured me, about 2 sips in, they would stop drinking because they would start feeling really uncomfortable. And
Why East Asia?
Well, it's an interesting story. So it seemed to have it arose about 7,000 years ago at the same time as rice agriculture. So something's going on. There's some connection between this set of mutations and rice agriculture. And one theory is that, so what's happening is they have 2 mutations. So alcohol gets broken down in your body in 2 steps. So ethanol comes in. This first enzyme called ADH takes it and pulls a couple hydrogens off it and turns it into this substance called acetaldehyde, which is still really nasty. It's still very poisonous. And so then there's another enzyme, ADLH, that takes another couple hydrogens off that and turns it into acetic acid, which is harmless. You can get rid of that really easily. What's going on with people with these mutations is that first step, their ADH enzyme is hyper efficient. So they're taking alcohol and immediately turning it into acetaldehyde. But then the second step, that enzyme is not very good. So all this acetaldehyde is building up in their system, and it starts happening right away. And that's what's giving them the flushing and the nausea and all this other stuff. The theory is that there's something about high acetaldehyde concentrations in the body that might help with tuberculosis or fungal poisoning. And so the theory is this was useful for hunter-gatherers who had just settled down and started to do agriculture. Suddenly you're living in big groups. Tuberculosis becomes a problem. Suddenly you're storing grain in a wet climate that's just going to start to rot. And so you're vulnerable to fungal poisoning. And so it may be an adaptation to rice agriculture.
And you said this is East Asia?
It's basically, it started in kind of where modern day Shanghai is, so southeast China. It's spread, in the book I show a map of the distribution of this gene right now, and it's spread to Japan and Korea a little bit, but it pretty much stayed there. And so part of my argument in the book is that if alcohol is just an evolutionary mistake, if it's just hijacking reward networks in our brain that evolve for other reasons, this, what's sometimes called the Asian flushing gene complex, this is the silver bullet. This is the solution. Evolution figured out the answer to this. And it's such a good solution that actually a chemical that simulates the same effect of this mutation is used to treat alcoholism. So you give it to alcoholics and they don't want to drink anymore because they have all these negative effects.
What's that called?
Disulfamine or something like that. It basically creates a chemical version. It somehow reproduces the effect of high levels of acetaldehyde in your body.
Now, one of the theories about Native Americans is that they didn't have alcohol as a part of their culture until the Europeans came in, the 13th century or whatever, they first started coming here. When they started introducing them to alcohol, they didn't have the genes for it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So you have to talk about North versus South America. So South America, they've had alcohol for a long time. So they were making chicha, this beer. But North America is one of the few places in the world where they didn't have indigenous alcohol cultures.
Do we know why?
I think that it's because they had a different drug that was doing the same job. So they had tobacco, this really native forms of tobacco are really powerful. They're much more powerful. They actually get you a little bit high from just the nicotine high. And then they were mixing in hallucinogens. And so I think they had a smokable drug. For whatever reason, their cultures hit upon this smokable drug that they used in exactly the same way other cultures used alcohol. You smoked it at treaties, signing, you needed to get along with strangers. You'd sit down first and smoke, the peace pipe. This is Calumet. This is where it comes from.
In North America, when you include Mexico, there's a long history of consumption of psilocybin mushrooms, right?
Yeah, I don't know how far north it goes. I'm not sure they were doing it in North America. It's possible. The hallucinogen they were including in the tobacco was datura. I don't know what. It'll get Jimson weed. It'll get you high, but it's not psilocybin. As far as I know, psilocybin was primarily used in kind of once you started northern Mexico going south. And then it was used in ancient times in all of those regions.
Datura.
Yeah.
Are you saying it right? Is it datura?
Maybe datura, yeah.
Is that one that's like really oddly dissociative? There's one that I remember reading. It was McKenna talking about it, where he had to take it. He had to stop using it because he was talking to a friend at a market, and he realized that the friend believed that they were back in his apartment. Like, he didn't recognize that he wasn't outside in a market.
Okay.
And this was, I want to say he was taking it in India.
All right. It could be. I mean, hallucinogens do all kinds of crazy stuff.
But datura is, see if we can find that.
Yeah, let's see what we can find out
it.
about the
Is that
effects of it.
I found I didn't like datura. Terrence McKenna, I just typed in his name in the drug, and
yes.
All this was in Nepal years ago.
Right, that's it. Yeah, that is it. Yeah.
Because he felt completely.
They felt like you really have no idea what reality is. Like say if you took Datura and we were in this room doing this podcast, you might think we were back at your house, or you might think we were at the bus station,
right?
Or you might think we were in the movie theater. Like you really have no idea what the fuck is going on, and the reality that you perceive through your eyes is completely distorted in some.
Psilocybin does that too.
Sort of, but it doesn't put you in a different place in terms of you don't think you're at the movie theater.
Right.
Like this guy, I remember this, he was discussing it with this guy where that's when he realized it was way too odd. This guy didn't know that they were at the market. He's like, hey man, we're at the market. We're not at your house.
Yeah. Have you ever done ketamine?
No, I have not.
I did it once, and it sounds a little bit like that, where I was like I was convinced I was just in a different universe now.
Yeah.
And it's not a universe I was thrilled about. It's kind of a fucked up universe. And I was never coming back. Like I was just filled with this,
Dread.
fuck, why did I walk through that door? And now I'm in this universe and I'm stuck here and I will never get back to my old universe.
Wow.
It was really strongly disassociated feeling that was unpleasant.
I wonder if that's real. I wonder if you really can, through chemicals, for a brief moment of time, take a peek into a neighboring dimension and experience some sort, like a chemical gateway into, well, like we know that there's more to the universe than what we can observe. Like if you wave your hand over the top of an earthworm, it has no idea you're there.
Okay.
Like how many of those senses do we lack to perceive? Like how many senses to perceive things that exist, but that for whatever reason we don't have the instruments to pick up? How much of that we can only imagine, right? We can imagine that what we see and what we can measure and what we observe with our eyes and ears and our senses, that this is all that exists. But that's just speculative. We really have no idea. When you take into account things like dark matter and dark energy, we really don't know what the fuck 90% of the universe is.
Yeah.
And then there's weird things like the concept of multiverses and the concept of parallel dimensions.
I saw you had Sean Carroll on the show.
Oh my God, he hurts my brain.
Yeah, yeah.
Sean, last time we talked, you hurt my brain.
Yeah, the idea
Sean.
of multiple universes is trippy.
Yeah.
I think there's almost, it got to be a genetic predisposition to being attracted to these ideas and not. And so I have a good friend, Jonathan Schooler, who's a social psychologist, who is convinced that consciousness is all that exists. And there could be multiple universes. Consciousness is real. It's actually the only real thing. And what's interesting is he has access to all the same, he's a scientist, he has access to all the same data that I have access to. And yet we are both looking at that same set of data, and my conclusion, I'm a physicalist, so I just think this is it. We're a bunch of physical chemicals. There's no meaning in the world. Humans create meaning because we're built to create meaning, but there's no inherent meaning in the world. And consciousness is just an epiphenomenon. So it's something that evolved for a certain reason because it helps us regulate ourselves and communicate to others in a certain way. And he looks at the same data and says, no, consciousness is all there is. And there are other universes, and this physical life is just one life.
Jimmy, do we have any more of these notepads? Do we have one of these for me?
You want to just hear?
I just want to write that dude's name down. No, it's okay. You should have one.
All right.
Okay. Because I want to write his name down. Does he have a book out or anything?
No, but he's a fun guy to talk to. I like him.
And does he, where's he at?
He was my colleague at UBC in Vancouver, but he's at Santa Barbara
Jonathan Schooler?
Jonathan Schooler.
Schooler?
So yeah, like schoolhouse, Schooler, yeah.
And what leads him to that conclusion?
He's got a lot of funny ideas.
But why?
So he thinks one of his research projects is on the decline effect. So you do a study and it works, and then you do it again and it doesn't work as well. And then you do it again and it works even less well. And my interpretation of that is that it's not a real effect. You got a random, it looked good randomly initially, and then the whole thing about statistics is that it washes out. If it's not a real effect, it goes away because. Right. But he thinks the universe gets tired of effects. He's like, the universe gets bored with this, and that's why the effect is happening. And I understand, like, intellectually, you can't rule that out. I can see how a kind of mind-only view of the world. You can't point to any particular bit of empirical evidence that rules it out. But the kind of stuff that sways me is selective brain deficits. So I knock out a part of your brain with a stroke. So you have a stroke and some part of your brain gets knocked out. And now you can't use proper nouns, or you can't use verbs. Like really, the brain subserves consciousness in such a really specific way that I have trouble imagining that consciousness is anything, first of all, ontologically, like really in the world, separate from the brain, and is really anything more than a kind of effect you get. We can talk about human level things and conscious level things in a way that makes sense to us because it's more efficient. But the only real description is the chemicals all the way down one, is my view.
And what is just because when you do studies over and over again that the effects don't work, that can't be with every study.
No, and I'm probably misquoting Jonathan on
Okay.
that, so you have to ask him about it. But yeah,
It's just a weird conclusion to draw. But here's the take that one of the things that makes me curious about it is the idea of a simulation theory. Right?
okay.
Now, if you believe in the possibility of the simulation theory, and Elon fully
lay that
believes
out
in
for
it.
me. So what's the theory?
The simulation theory is that if, like we can do now, we can have virtual reality. I don't know if you've ever experimented with like the HTC Vive or any of these things. They're not very good in terms of, they're very cool, but they're not very good in terms of like convincing you that this is reality.
Right.
But they're way better than Pong.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, we're old enough to remember.
Right,
Pong.
remember Pong.
Space Invaders.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, so we played
Which was
that.
really engrossing at the time.
Oh my God,
right?
you couldn't
Yeah.
believe it, right?
Yeah.
You're like,
yeah.
I can't believe I'm playing something on the TV. I'm making the TV move.
Yeah.
But now
Right.
you got Call of Duty, and it's like way more engrossing, and Halo, and all these crazy games. If you extrapolate that with this sort of HTC Vive or Oculus technology, you would imagine that one day there's going to be an artificial reality that's indiscernible from regular reality. When you talk to people like Elon Musk about Neuralink, right, and they're going to essentially wire your brain. So they're going to reach areas of your brain and stimulate them with some sort of energy, electricity. I don't know what they're doing to do that. It hasn't been really clearly demonstrated how exactly they're planning on ramping this up into the future. But
Okay.
one of the things that Elon said to me, you're going to be able to communicate without words, which is kind of terrifying, but also fascinating.
Yeah.
But I would imagine,
I'm not sure I would like that.
right? I would
I like having
imagine
words. Yeah.
that this sort of this innovation is also going to apply to things like artificial reality and virtual reality, and that it's going to get so good you're not going to be able to tell the difference between reality and artificial reality.
Right.
If that's the case, how do we know if we're not already there? If one day it becomes indiscernible and virtual reality or a simulation of reality is indiscernible from regular reality,
Right.
how will we know? Well, Nick Bostrom, who is another guy who broke my brain, who was on the podcast, was arguing that according to probability theory, we are in a simulation.
Okay.
And this is where it gets really weird and like very
But why
intellectually
why
masturbatory.
Would whoever, yeah, this is where like, why would those people create us as a simulation?
I don't think
Like,
that's
we're
what they're
pretty-
saying.
Okay.
They're saying we did it.
We created ourselves.
The
as a
idea is
simulation?
that let's imagine that a simulation doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Okay, we're not in a simulation. This
Yeah.
is just
we're actually here in
regular-
Austin.
right. We're here in
talking.
Austin, carbon-based life form. We're really drinking whiskey.
Okay. Yeah.
If human beings don't blow ourselves up, or we don't get hit by another asteroid, and we last another 1,000,000 years, I can't imagine a world where we don't have something that you can plug into that's indiscernible from this. I can't imagine.
Would we do this conversation?
Why wouldn't we? Right?
This
Why
is the
wouldn't we?
thing.
I love conversations. Why
Why wouldn't we do new things though? This is what I guess
New things in what way?
I think I've heard about the simulation theory before, but what I don't get is why. So let's say it's 1,000 years from now we have the technology to do
Okay.
that. Why wouldn't we just simulate new things we haven't done already?
Maybe we are doing that. Maybe we haven't
simultaneously?
done this.
All right.
Yeah, I mean,
Oh, okay.
but here's the thing. If you could do simulation, what do you think Westworld is?
Right.
The show Westworld
Yeah.
is you're going back and living like it's 1840.
Yeah.
And that's really engrossing for people. It's really, people are very attracted to that idea. I would be attracted to that idea. If I could go with Lewis and Clark, if I could virtually go with Lewis and Clark and make that trip across the continental United States, oh my God, I'd be all in, man.
Yeah.
What is this, Jamie?
It's the new background Unreal Engine 5.
Oh my God.
I tried to get a good spot here, so when they put the lights on here in a second.
Let me pause and explain to him.
Oh.
Do you follow video games at all?
No,
Okay.
I haven't done video games
The
since Pong.
Unreal Engine, the most recent version of the Unreal Engine is absolutely sensational.
Okay.
It's so good and so vivid, and the dynamic lighting, is that what it's called? Dynamic lighting?
Yeah, because I think
Do you
that's
have
what he's doing
do
right
you have
Shadowing?
stuff on, or are you just looking
No,
at
this
it?
is just visual.
Oh,
You,
that's
you
great.
could,
Okay.
you could. They'd use it as the heart, like the engine. That's why it's called an engine
Okay.
of a virtual reality game. If someone so chose to use that.
Oh, so
All
someone
right.
can do it in a VR game. So what it is it's so, the Uncanny Valley?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is really close to bridging the Uncanny Valley. So let's play some of it. This is fake. I mean,
And
this
he'll
is
change
we're watching a
stuff.
video, right? So this is a guy. He's fucking with all the different. You don't have to do it. Just let it play out.
Okay.
He's fucking with all the different textures and all the lighting. Like, this is all real, man.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's crazy. So it has dust in it. It has lighting effects due to the sun traveling over the
Yeah.
place.
Yeah, that's
I
good.
mean, it's fucking incredible. And look at the textures and the details of this.
Yeah.
They're so close. They're really, really close. But, again, if you look forward, if you see this, you sort of extrapolate and say, okay, well, what will this be like 1,000 years from now? Well, then you're going to feel things and smell things. And
Right.
that is certainly inside the realm of what you can imagine,
Yeah.
right? Especially when you can see something like this, where they can have the sun moving across the sky and
Yeah,
changing
that's cool.
changing all the shadows. I mean, it's
But
incredible.
You can also have that by going to Arizona and just walking around. And
Some
so
people
this is
can't,
the
though.
thing is like,
Yeah, of course you
I
can.
don't
Of
get
course,
the-
but hey, of course you can. But that doesn't mean this isn't fucking insane.
yeah,
Like, of course you can go there, but the idea that you could put on a headpiece, like some sort of Oculus Rift headpiece.
and be transported
Yeah.
to full immersion.
So now he's changing it to a different place. So he's gonna look at all these different textures and all these things. Go way ahead.
Yeah, there's one thing they went. I don't know if this is the exact video I was watching. I think it is. They turned it from like Utah, like it is, like we're watching, and then hit like there it is, like medieval lighting, and it goes to like Lord of the Rings
Okay.
with the same shapes.
Look at this.
Oh wow.
And
You're in
everything.
Mordor now.
Yeah.
You're looking out for Sauron.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, it's what they can do now just with video games is pretty incredible. But again, like if I'm looking at this, I'm like, oh, she's not real.
Yeah.
She
yeah.
doesn't. She's too uniform in her movements.
Yeah.
Right. People have like weird little sort of herky jerky variabilities, and
But
she's
Yeah.
this is even easier for us to now. We could mocap you, Joe, and get your body movements in there in probably an hour, less than an hour, half
It
an
would
hour.
look like Joe
and it would be
walking
Joe's
around.
movements, Joe's
That's kinda
kicking and
cool.
walking and
well, I'm
jumping.
in a video
and-
game. I'm in
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah,
UFC
correct,
game.
correct,
They've
yeah,
already done that with
Really?
me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm in a UFC video game. But
That's trippy.
it looks that's not nearly as good as this in terms of like the visuals and even the movements of the characters. The point is, as technology advances,
Yeah.
they're going to have that shit dialed in where you're going to feel it. There's going to be haptic feedback. Have you ever done anything with haptic
No,
feedback?
but I understand the concept. Yeah.
There's a company in town called Sandbox, and there's all these cool games that you can play, and one of them is this wild zombie game called Deadwood Mansion. So you put on virtual reality headsets. My family loves to do it.
Okay.
At one time, I had third place in the world.
Oh, wow.
I was the
Okay.
third
Hardcore.
place zombie killer on Earth.
yeah.
Some motherfuckers have beat my score
Yeah.
badly since then.
You'll come back.
It's just one of those. I'm not gonna come back. These fucking kids, they're too good.
Okay.
But the point is, they put you in a haptic feedback vest, and they give you these goggles, and you have this gun, like this plastic gun, and these zombies come running at you, and when they grab you, you feel it in
can
your
feel
chest.
it. Wow.
It's
that's
very
intense.
crude,
Yeah.
but it gives you this. It gives
Yeah.
you just enough of a jolt
Yeah,
where it makes
wow,
it extra
that's
fun.
trippy.
But again, it's like Pong,
Yeah.
right? Boop 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 boop, and then go from Pong to Unreal Engine.
Yeah. No, I can see
Yeah,
it.
that's
buy
it.
one.
Oh, you could buy one.
Yeah.
That's a haptic
It
feedback.
works wirelessly
I may
with a
need
lot
one
of
of those.
different VR things.
It does enhance the experience. It definitely does. It gives you a little bit extra fun. But it's so crude in comparison to something that one day, like Ready Player One. Have you familiar with that movie?
I have not. No, I've not played video games or really done.
No,
much
Ready Player
since-
One is a movie.
It's a movie. Okay,
Yeah, it's a
all right.
Spielberg movie,
Okay.
and it's about immersive video games in the future. How people's lives just completely revolve around these immersive video games, and all of the money they're chasing is all this virtual money in these games. And
That's now, right? A lot of people are addicted to video games and just
yes,
spend- yeah.
The way they lay it out though in Ready Player One, it's amazing, and it makes you realize like, wow, this isn't too crazy. You know, like The Matrix when it came out was crazy.
Yeah, yeah.
But The Matrix today, you're like, maybe that's not that crazy. And Ready Player One is, in my eyes, a really an excellent example of what we may be looking at 50 years from now or 100 years from now or whatever it is.
All right.
And the haptic feedback suits that the lead character has on in this film allows this girl that he has a relationship with in the game to touch him,
Yeah.
and he feels it through the suit.
Yeah.
You see the suit
That's what my partner
lighting
and I
up.
need.
It's pretty wild.
She's in the east coast of the U.S. I'm in Canada. We're across a closed border.
You need some
and
sort of
we need a
haptic.
haptics.
You need to move the
FaceTime's
fuck
good.
out of Canada. That's what you need to
I
do.
need to
These
get the
goddamn
fuck out.
tyrants up there.
That's true.
What are they doing with people?
I need to get out of Canada.
But
yeah, I can't do
Jamie,
that.
you just read Ready Player 2, right? You ready?
Yeah.
The movie.
Yep.
Or
The
the
books
book,
are
rather.
the books are more in depth and more than the movie was even capable of doing because the IP, I guess they would have had to pay for. Just impossible. And what they were
right.
doing, they were inserting people in the movies, reenacting things with your favorite movie characters. You had to memorize the lines and perform them in the exact way that was done in the movie, or you fail. I had to restart again.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff is very close to almost being able to be done. They're working on something like Ready Player One in real life called the Metaverse. I was trying to look it up. I've heard about it sort of with NFTs, and we might be on the way there. I don't know how much computing power it's going
But
to
do
take.
we want?
whatever, but
So
we're
in the
getting close.
Matrix movie, they want to escape the Matrix.
Some people do. But
Some
remember
people
that
do.
one dude?
The one dude does it, and he's a pussy, right? We hate that guy. We hate that guy. We don't like him, right?
He
And
just
why
wants
is
to
that?
be rich and he wants to eat steak.
He wants to eat
remember?
steak and have
Yeah.
the women, but it's all fake. So we
Right.
want the real world.
We want the real world. But
We
what
want
is
the
the
real
real world? That's the question. What is the real world?
I think it's this world. So I mean, I completely grant the intellectual point that, I mean, this is an old philosophical problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in philosophy, there's always been this idea that we could be deceived about everything we think we know. So
Right.
Descartes talked about the demon, right? So this demon, I think that I'm sitting in front of a fire in this inn, and that I just ate this food, and that I'm drinking this beer. But it could be the case that there's an evil demon who's deceiving me about all this, and it's all an illusion,
yeah.
and I can't really know it. And so this is an ancient idea that everything, and actually Zhuangzi, this early Taoist philosopher, talked about, he used dreams to kind of get us into the same thing. But the dreams are basically like a low-tech version of what you're talking about, right?
Sure.
You dream about a thing and you think it's real, and you cry and you get scared and you feel these emotions, and then you wake up and you realize it was just a dream. And so how do we know that we're not in a dream now? It's exactly the same problem. So philosophers have been thinking about this for, over, he was 400, so 2,500 years.
Sure. But
It's Occam's razor. So it's just, what's the most parsimonious explanation that we have? So it could be the case that we are all simulations in our future selves' lives, or we're actually in tanks, and these aliens are farming us out for our electricity, and we're not really here. It just seems to me the most plausible explanation is the simplest one.
I'm not necessarily sure I agree.
Okay.
Here's why.
Okay.
How about your friend, Jonathan Schooler?
You're going to super get along with Jonathan.
I bet I am. I'm thinking I am.
Yeah.
But how about we have this attachment to the idea that all of our life has been real.
Mm-hmm.
And so since it's been uniform in its realness, we assume that it's real.
Yeah.
We assume that the touch and the textures and the tastes and the sounds and the emotions and the pains and the joys have all been very similar or at least recognizable that this is what we have. But there's so many variables and there's so much we don't know. Like, what the fuck is going on when we go to sleep? We're just guessing.
Yeah.
We're completely guessing. We shut off every night and we like it and we look forward to it. We look forward to like going blank and disappearing and traveling to wherever the fuck the mind goes to while the body just lays there prone. You know, it's odd. Like, I went to check on my daughter the other day to see if she was asleep, and I'm looking at her lying there. And I was thinking, it's so strange that this is a normal thing that people do. We just shut off, and we just lay there with our mouths open and our eyes closed.
But we're doing stuff.
Yeah, we are doing stuff.
We're reorganizing information.
And we're repairing. And
we're repairing stuff.
Yeah,
we're actually...
but it's fascinating that the human animal, and not just the human animal, but most mammals.
My dog does this too.
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
It's an incredibly vulnerable thing to do.
Yeah.
And yet we all do it. It's like, what purpose has it served in evolution? Like, how come sharks don't do it? Sharks just keep moving.
Are stupid.
They're stupid as fuck. Right.
So they're stupid as fuck. So
but
we need
dolphins
it
do it.
because dolphins are really smart.
But they
so
swim.
Animals that are smart need it. So we need to consolidate. I mean, this is outside my area of expertise, but my understanding of the function of sleep and dreaming especially is that it's allowing us to consolidate the information the data we've acquired over the course of the day. And that's really crucial for smart animals that are accumulating knowledge. And that is not a shark. Sharks just
right.
they're pretty,
chomp,
they're pretty
chomp,
simple.
chomp.
Chomp. You don't
but
need to learn that.
Dolphins swim while they're sleeping?
Yeah,
apparently
they can
not.
do.
It says they're motionless on the surface of the water.
They
But
need
they also,
8 hours sleep a day.
in shifts, weirdly.
Oh, the right half gets 4 hours of sleep, but the left half also gets 4 hours of sleep, just at different times.
So they're doing.
Whoa!
And
so
so
part
that's
of
an
their brain
adaptation
sleeps.
to the fact that they're in water, but they're air-breathing mammals like us. So they
And
need to have part of their brain on.
Fucking danger everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think there's stories you can tell about why we dream, why we sleep, that are completely consistent with the idea that I am the same body I was when I was little. The scar I have on my forehead really is from George Lloyd.
Says who?
Hitting me with a snow shovel.
Says who? That guy's a
you're
part
right.
of your memory.
It is totally. I understand a priori.
Just think about how
you can't
bad
prove
memory
it.
is.
No, memory's bad.
Terrible.
But the body's not bad. The body records things.
Imagine if memory is that bad because it's like a built-in design to keep you confused.
Yeah, no,
Keep you like
you're gonna super get along.
His
with
friend,
Jonathan.
the only thing I Googled about him, he has a very interesting theory about memory.
Yeah? What is it?
That verbalizing it fucks up the accuracy of it.
Verbal overshadowing.
Yeah.
That's
So-
for sure true. Because how many friends have told you like a story from childhood and you're like, bitch, that did not happen that way.
Yeah.
Like, things didn't happen that way.
No, that's different. So his research actually looks at the fact that if you have an experience and then you try to describe it in words, it fucks up your recall of the experience.
Of course,
And
yeah.
so if the classic study they did was on jam, so you have like people taste jams and rate, and which jam do you want to take home? Which one tastes the best? If you have them, then you taste the jams, but you have to write down tasting notes on the jams.
And you rate them?
Yeah, you rate them. Then you get really confused and you take home a shitty jam because you're thinking about it too much has messed up your appraisal.
Well, that's one of the things that people always say about psychedelic experiences, in that in describing the psychedelic experience, you then become attached to the narrative of the description of the psychedelic experience.
Yeah. Psychedelic experiences are interesting. So I talk about them in the book as well. You had Michael Pollan on at one point, and I watched part of that show. And he repeated an analogy that he uses in his book that I quote in my book, which is that psychedelics are for cultural evolution what mutagens are for genetic evolution. So genetic evolution needs mutations to work on. And usually mutations suck, right? They usually don't work very well, and those organisms die. But every once in a while, you get a mutation that works, and that can get selected on and become the new normal. And for cultural evolution, this is possibly what psychedelics are doing. So we need humans. Part of the argument in the book is that humans are uniquely dependent on creativity, unlike any other species. So, cheetahs chase gazelles. They have their claws and their teeth. They don't need to think up new technologies for catching gazelles, right? And they can get better, but it's through genetic evolution, not cultural evolution. Humans are helpless without tools. So we're literally helpless without tools. So the most basic tool is fire. So at some point in our lineage, we tamed fire, and fire allowed us to cook food. And once you can cook food, you can digest it a lot better. Cooking is basically pre-digesting your food for you. It's almost like a parent or bird chewing up food for their chicks. It allows you to digest it better. And then our genes change. So once we have fire, our jaws change. So our teeth get less robust, our jaw is less robust than our ancestors were. And actually our guts change. So our stomach and our intestinal system is shorter than it would be in a primate that ate raw foods. So we're so dependent on fire that we biologically have adapted to eating cooked foods. We could not survive without cooked foods anymore.
Just like our bodies are biologically adapted to clothing.
Yeah. So the hairlessness and so humans need tools, and we need constantly evolving tools because the environment's changing. Even if the environment's staying the same, we have other cultural groups that are trying to exploit that environment in competition with us. And if they do a better job, then we're out of luck. And so we're uniquely dependent on creativity in a way that no other primate is, no other species is really. And so we need innovation. And Pollan's point is that one way we could get that is occasionally completely scrambling. So what psychedelics are doing is just de-patterning the brain completely. So just parts of your brain are talking to other parts of the brain that normally doesn't happen at all. And as he points out, that usually results in bullshit. So, I did a lot of psychedelics in San Francisco in my 20s, and I used to go up to Mount Tam and do mushrooms or LSD. And this one trip, I always brought a notebook with me. I talk about this in the book that I was convinced during one trip that I had solved everything. That I was as a PhD student at the time, I was convinced that once I published this thing I was writing, they would give me my PhD, they would give me a tenured full professorship, and that was it. And it was because I had proven that truth is the color blue. And I had like a 20-page treatise where I laid this out. It had diagrams and there were mathematical equations. And I really came out of the trip thinking, this is it. I'm fucking solved it. And then the next day I looked at it. I was like, oh yeah, I probably won't publish this. So most of what comes out of trips is complete nonsense because
but
it's just like
there was a kernel of
there's a kernel of something.
There
was, and actually the kernel of information I took out of that particular trip, I kind of remember was about my personal life. So it helped me figure out a relationship I was in. But
what did it have to do with the color blue?
Nothing at all. The color blue was nonsense. So it was this complete. So Pollan's point is that most of what gets produced is nonsense, but every once in a while it might be useful. And so it's basically in terms of evolution, it's a high risk, high payoff strategy.
What do you think was there something that had to do with your confidence in having achieved some sort of revelation that maybe you were trying to seek the same thing or come to find some sort of understanding about your own personal life, and you chose to do it through a proxy? Like you tried to seek it out through this thing and thinking that if I saw
an analogy for
yes.
That's possible. It's possible. But the actual argument was bullshit.
It's nonsense.
Right? It's not
right.
publishable.
But was there anything in there that where you go, wow, I had a real good point here?
No. It's all no. I'll send it to you. You can publish it.
It might scramble my brain.
Yeah. So I think Pollan's right that psychedelics are scrambling stuff, but then every once in a while something really cool and new comes out.
Mm.
And my argument, I actually don't explicitly make this argument in the book, but listening to him on your show is what I thought, is that alcohol is a way to do that in a slightly lower risk way, right?
Lower risk.
So we're scrambling our brains a little bit right now, but we're still pretty much connected to reality. So the innovation level is going to be lower because we're not completely depatterning our brains. but the likelihood that we're going to come up with something useful is higher. And so what I would argue is chemical intoxicants all have this role to play in accelerating and enhancing cultural evolution. Hallucinogens have a place in that ecosystem, right? But typically, hallucinogens are used very rarely. So in cultures where everyone does them, they do them every once in a while. So typically, there's like an annual ritual or semi-annual ritual where everyone takes hallucinogens and gets really messed up. Another way to do it is have a special class of people whose job it is to get messed up on hallucinogens pretty regularly and then bring their insights back to the group.
How are you going to trust those guys, though?
Those are shamans, right?
Yeah,
so
right.
those are these people.
Shamans are supposed to guide you through it, right?
They can, but I mean, traditionally in cultures, they do the hallucinogens. You come to them and you say, we're not catching gazelles anymore. We go out to the usual hunting grounds and there are no gazelles. Everyone's hungry. What do the gods say? So it's always couched in terms of communications from the supernatural realm. So what I think is going on is there's this problem. We have a problem that we haven't figured out as a culture. We need some insights. And so we go to the shaman, we say, what have we done wrong? Why are the gods angry with us? And the shaman goes and gets completely lit up on psychedelics and spends 2 days in the woods and writes a thing about truth is color blue and writes this other thing about something completely random. But maybe somewhere in there they have an idea that we've angered the gods because of X, Y, or Z. And that works. Like actually doing one of those things gets us to the new hunting ground where we can get gazelles again. So sometimes it's a particular class of people whose job it is to do intoxicants in a much more serious way. And that would normally impair you. Like you wouldn't be able to hold down a normal job and do stuff. But that's okay because that's their job in the culture. That's their niche that they fill.
So you think that there's some sort of benefit to having some people that are professionals do that work rather than the general population?
If you're talking about seriously messing yourself up, yeah. So I think, and you could argue that maybe in modern large-scale societies, artists fill some of that role, right?
But why? Here's the thing, like why would you pawn it off on somebody else? Don't you think the more people that have these revelations, the better? And the more people that have these revelations, the more people are going to sort of understand some of the dilemmas that we face and, maybe what's happening with the ego and various parts of the psyche that are tripping us up.
Yeah, I mean, I think now in modern society, maybe we have the luxury where everyone can figure this out for themselves. But I think in a traditional society, like if your job was hauling stones to build the pyramids, like you getting more insight into stuff is not going to be very helpful. You need to just haul stones. And
if
so
you have to haul stones.
If you have to haul stones. And now
if you're
I think
working as a slave.
Yeah. So I think now we have more egalitarianism and people have access to resources in a way that maybe this is something everyone should be doing.
I don't think I used to say that, everyone, but now I changed my tune because I think some people are just not wired right for it. And I don't know why, right? I only know how I'm wired. Everybody's wired differently, I've talked to people that, they'll have some sort of a weird interaction with people online and they have to get on medication.
Yeah.
I know quite a few people like that. Like, they'll do a podcast and the podcast goes sideways and they get on fucking anti-anxiety pills.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, human cultures are clearly ecosystems, right?
Yeah.
So we have people with different personality traits and they all play different roles.
And they're important. Everyone's important. The super sensitive people are important.
Yeah.
Just like the super callous people are important.
Yes, we need some super callous people.
You need people that can handle anything, and you need people that they have a really difficult time with everything. And sometimes those people make beautiful songs,
Yeah.
And like there's a place for everybody in this strange, weird soup of humanity.
Yeah.
And I'm always very wary when people dismiss certain things as being trivial or certain experiences being non-necessary. I don't think, and again, I used to be way more cocky about this because I think I was operating on limited information, and then I think I had less control of the ego. And I say less because I
So
certainly
this was
don't.
when in your life? What
When I was younger, when I first started taking psychedelics,
Okay.
like
So
early
what
in my
age is that?
30s.
30s.
Yeah, I think I had a distorted perception. Not think, no. I know I did. I still do, right? No one has a real clear understanding of what the fuck is going on when you're tripping on DMT. You're just guessing. But one thing that I've gotten out of it for sure is that to be more open to the idea that everyone is going through a different experience and that we're all, like I've had people say, like, I couldn't imagine being, a fireman, or I couldn't imagine being a musician, singing on stage in front of all those people, or I couldn't imagine being a professor, giving a lecture in front of all those people. But some people, I couldn't imagine being a bricklayer.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine being a motorcycle mechanic. Like, everybody has a different fucking thing in this world, and we're all this weird container of chemical soup.
Yeah.
And everybody's genes and life experiences and all these things play a part of what it means to be you, or to be me, or to be Jamie, or anyone who's listening to this thing. And we all like to look at the world like, oh, I see the world and you need to live the way that I live because I've figured this out about the world. But I've only figured out that part about the world, like how it works for me with my peculiar genetics and my peculiar life experiences and sensitivities or lack thereof. Everybody's so different.
Yeah, there's this concept in evolution of frequency-dependent selection. And so if you're in a population, let's say, so I'm introverted. And it's a bit of a puzzle why introverts exist, because we're not very good at social stuff. We like to spend a lot of time alone.
Don't you think you think a lot when you're introverted?
Probably we think more.
So you sort things out more. So you probably come up with ideas that are beneficial to the rest of the tribe.
Right, but how does that help me?
It helps you because you're
because
an integral
genes
part
only
of the
care
tribe.
about me. Yeah, so there may be group level effects, and there's clearly an effect where if I'm in a culture where introverts are rare, there's going to be a marginal advantage to being an introvert because I can bring things to the group that other people can't. So what you're going to end up with is a mix of people. So you're going to have introverts and extroverts. You're going to have people who are very conscientious and people who are incredibly not conscientious. And each of them are going to play some role in the culture.
Well, I have a theory about today's culture, is that one of the things that is unfortunately happening is that we have become so kind and compassionate that we've allowed certain personality traits and certain people to exist unchecked. And it's certainly not talking about introverts, but I am talking about sloths.
Mm-hmm.
We've allowed a lot of the homeless situation, right? Clearly some of the homeless situation is mentally ill people. Clearly some of the homeless situation is people with drug dependency. But it's also, some of it has got to be people that have no desire for growth. They just decide to lay down on the concrete floor for whatever reason. I'm not judging them. I'm just saying this based on their current state. They could have been abused as a young person. They could have gone through personal trauma. They could have been, who knows what happened to them. But whatever it is about our culture that coddles that, San Francisco is a fantastic example of how that's a disaster for everybody else and bad for the tribe. Mm-hmm. Whereas the perceptions, I don't believe that there are more people that don't have their shit together today than did in 1930. But I do believe there's more homeless people today than there were in 1930 per capita. And I think it's because we're more compassionate. And in being more compassionate, more understanding, and more kind, that's all great. Like, I love that. I want to live in a world where people are more compassionate, more kind. However, I think there's an argument that opens up the door for a lot of people that take advantage of those things. Like, we all know someone who says, like, man, I'm too nice. People fuck me over. I've got these mooches and all these people in my life because I'm too nice. We all know people like that. I think a society can be too nice. I think there's a real argument for that. I think it's just like from the microcosm, if you look at it in the macro, I think those things, they're analogous. They work. You can make these connections between the way human beings live their life with people fucking up their problems. I mean, how many of us have people like that in our lives? You know, like I know quite a few friends that are like, they will tell you, I am too nice. I have too many people that are trying to take advantage of me, and they're always doing this, they're always doing that, and they want this, and they want that, and they're always selfish. I think that's the same thing with our culture. There's people that don't want to contribute, and they don't want to be a part of society in any meaningful way, but they think the society owes them something. And that has accelerated in modern times because we've placed value on being compassionate and being kind, which is a great thing. But the side effect of that, the imbalance, is that we've created this time where we have unprecedented numbers of people camping on the sidewalk, which is wild. But I think they're connected. And I think you could look at human beings that have problems like that in their lives, and you could look at a culture that has problems like that in their streets. And I think it's kind of the same thing going on, is that I love kind, compassionate people. But it always frustrates me when I have friends that can't get mooches out of their life and can't get vampires, like my friend Duncan Trussell calls them emotional vampires, because they really are like vampires. They will cling to you and suck your life's blood, and they will take energy from you to feed themselves, and they don't contribute to your existence. They just distract from it. They just detract from it.
All right. Yeah, it's a complicated issue. I mean, San Francisco, some people are homeless because to live there, you have to make $1 million.
You don't have to live there.
Rent.
You don't have to camp out in the middle of fucking Mission.
Yeah.
You could go wherever you want. You don't have to live there.
Access to, unlike the 30s, they have access to really powerful drugs. And so this is the modern life. Modern life is weird. So in traditional societies, you had very limited access to intoxicants. So if you were living in a traditional society, you would get access to alcohol or hallucinogens in a very controlled ritual environment. So there would be times when you would do it. You would do it with other people. You would, in a lot of cultures, when you drink, there's a kind of toastmaster or someone who's in charge of the pace at which you're drinking. So like in a traditional Chinese banquet to this day, you don't just drink as much. We don't sit here drinking out of coffee mugs as much as we want. It's sitting there in front of you, and then someone makes a toast, and that's when you're allowed to drink. And then you put your cup down, it gets refilled, but it sits there until someone makes a toast. And that's a way to control alcohol consumption. So alcohol has always been consumed in these communal, ritually organized ways that help there were safety measures. It's like a seatbelt. And that's gone in modern societies. Like the fact that you can drive into a drive-in liquor store and have your SUV filled up with vodka and scotch and firearms and cannabis probably, and some Cheetos, whatever. You take that all back to your house, and you have it in your house, and you can just consume it whenever you want. That is something that we're not evolutionary equipped to do. It's never happened before. And it's gotten worse with COVID. So I don't talk about this too much in the book, but I talk about it in some other pieces I've written more recently, that COVID has made this so much worse because it's driven drinking totally into the household. And all the normal social cues that you have to help control your drinking are gone.
Well, not just that. People are trying to cope.
Yeah, and people are depressed.
It's very bizarre, strange. Not so much now, but 12 months unless you're in Canada.
Yeah, unless you're in Canada. Yes, thanks, dude.
They still live in March of 2020. But if you're going back to last year, like April of last year, I found myself drinking a lot. I was drinking a lot of wine. Like every night, I'd have 3 or 4 glasses of wine with dinner because I think I was trying to calm myself.
Yeah, and you're not going out doing other things that are distracting. I had my partner's in the States, and so we've been doing the long distance thing across a closed border. Every time I go to see her and I come back to Canada, I've got to quarantine for 2 weeks.
Do you teach in Canada? Is that what?
Yeah, but I've been on sabbatical, so.
Can't you teach on Zoom from the East Coast?
Teach. Yeah, but my daughter's in Vancouver,
so I have reason to be in
Vancouver.
What does your partner do? Sorry to be prying.
She's a neuroscientist,
Oh.
social cognitive neuroscientist.
Dating a bunch of smart people, huh?
Yeah.
Look at you.
So she's got. We have the same. She has
Yeah.
kids in Boston. I have a kid in Vancouver. So we're doing the long distance thing.
Got it.
So every time I came back from seeing her, I would have to quarantine for 2 weeks alone. And I've done that now 7. I've done 2 with her, but I've done 7 alone. So 14 weeks of being in my apartment, not allowed to leave, and with essentially unlimited access to alcohol because you can order alcohol online, they deliver it to your door. That's really unhealthy. So like when I was writing the book, so it was helpful when I was writing drunk, it was awesome. The first 3 quarantines I did, I was still writing, and I wish the quarantines would never end. It was great. I'm an introvert too, so I can go long periods of time without seeing people. And I just focused and I wrote. It was awesome. It was really great.
Do you have to specifically stay in a place, or you can stay in your own house?
You can stay in your own house, but you can't leave.
But there's like apartments or hotels that they make some
That's a
people
new thing. That's a new thing, and that's why I drove to Seattle.
A new thing. They
it's
made
a-
it worse.
They made it worse, and it's a don't get me started.
Fucking Canada.
Don't
What
get
are you
me
doing?
started on Canadian COVID policy.
But how did this happen? I don't understand.
It's the Trudeau government wanting to look tough. There's no
Really?
scientific rationale for it, especially when they did it. Like if they'd done it earlier, it would have made more sense. But now it's just catering to people who feel like they aren't being tough enough. I mean, I'm fully vaccinated. There's no reason for me to quarantine when I go back to Canada. I tested negative here, right? I'm going to test negative before I go back. They test me at the border.
yeah.
But at that point, I am safer than any random person
For sure.
wandering around the streets of Vancouver. But I still have to stay in my apartment for 2
Rules
weeks.
are rules.
So it's frustrating. But the upshot, the point of this is the solitude, like being alone, and especially once the book was done. Normally when I finish a project, I go into this weird, I don't know if you have this, like if you write a show and then you perform it and then you need to do a new thing. I can't do the new thing right away. Like I go into this state where I just want to not think for a little while. And that's normally when I would kayak or I'd garden or I'd chop wood or do
That's
something
healthy.
physical.
Yeah.
That's healthy, right? But
Yeah.
instead I was stuck in my apartment. So
Wow.
I don't have a project anymore. I can't leave my apartment. It was bad.
So what'd you do?
I drank a lot.
By yourself?
Yeah. I mean, I would start drinking earlier. I would drink more than I wanted. And so, and this is not just me. I mean, this has happened to a lot of people. There's good data on this that obviously consumption moved away from bars and restaurants to the home. And some people initially said, oh, all that's happening is it's shifting from one place to another. But there's evidence now that it's actually gone up in absolute terms. So people are drinking more. There's more drinking disorder problems. People are getting weight. People are feeling that they're not in control of their drinking.
Apparently there's more domestic violence and child abuse as well.
Yeah, it's not good. And it's because we're drinking in a social environment that is unprecedented. We never had unlimited private. In my apartment in Vancouver, I'm going to go back and quarantine there when I'm done with this. I have enough alcohol to like kill a mid-sized village of people, you know, really. I mean, if someone drank all that, they'd just be dead. And it's mine. I can drink as much of it as I want, whenever
Right.
I want. That's weird. It's
Do you have a
evolutionarily
plan?
weird.
What do you plan out what you're going to do when you go back? You have 14 days. You're probably getting wicked shape.
I work out. Yeah, I've got a lot of stuff in my apartment to work out. I work
That's
out
good.
a lot. It's hard. It's not normal for people to be isolated like
No,
that. So
it's not. And it's also not smart. And especially because there's no, when you look at the motivation, like you can poke so many holes in it.
No, I know.
It'll make you angry.
We could have a whole show about
We
that.
should.
We should have a whole show about Canadian COVID
We should
policy.
get Justin Trudeau drunk.
Justin Trudeau
Get him on a podcast.
and find out
go,
why
what the
he's
fuck
doing
are you
this.
doing,
What are
man?
you doing, dude? It's
Part
been
of
hard.
his problem is he's too handsome.
Yeah.
Big problem.
But this has been hardest on, like, my daughter's 14, and that age group it's been brutal for them because this is the time when they just want to be out with their friends,
Right.
socializing.
It's one of the reasons I moved to Texas.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
Because in California, all the parents were paranoid. They didn't want their kids. But I'm like, well, look, we know what it does to children. It is statistically safer than the flu, right? If you just
For
look at the
kids,
statistics
yeah,
for kids. Well, both my kids got it. It was nothing.
Yeah.
And I know some kids got it and it's not nothing, but usually that's because of pre-existing conditions and you should adjust accordingly. Kids that have all sorts of comorbidities, they're the ones who have real problems with it. But most kids, they don't have a problem with this particular disease. We're very fortunate because of that.
Yeah, it's a cost-benefit analysis, right? And so for kids, the cost is huge of not letting them socialize.
Yes, it's a giant cost socially. When you're talking about 10-year-olds, oh my God, man, it's just bad for them.
How old are your kids?
One just turned 11 and one turned 13. So they're these young kids that I have that are experiencing this weird new life.
Yeah.
It was way more troubling in California because people had a different approach to it.
Yeah.
There's less cases here, and people just generally have a different attitude about it. And they had a different attitude about it back in May.
Yeah.
So my kids, like, we were on a lake out here in May, and then we were jumping in the water and playing. Like, we can go outside. This is crazy. And I'm realized, like, how bad is this for children?
Yeah.
Where, like, 2 months of this shit where you're locked in home, worried about an invisible demon that's floating through the air and taking people's lives, and we're all walking around with masks on.
Yeah.
It's weird. It's very weird.
Well, when they taped off playgrounds, I was just like, what the fuck?
Nonsense.
It's like the safest thing. As far as we know, even back in spring of 2020, we knew that outdoor transmission was not very common.
Well, we heard that, but we were still nervous about it, right?
Yeah.
And then we were worried about touching things.
They were
People
wiping down Amazon packages.
Oh, yeah.
It's just
my manager was spraying everything with
spraying
bleach.
vegetables.
Yeah,
with
it's
bleach.
like everybody got weird.
No, it's still like today, people are constantly in Vancouver. Still, you walk into a store, they want you to sanitize. And I'm just like, you know what? Surfaces aren't a thing anymore.
Yeah,
Thank you.
we know
No,
that for
thanks.
sure.
So,
This is the thing that's so troubling. But here's the thing that drives me the most bonkers is like there's so many opportunities to educate people about strengthening your immune system. There's a reason why it only kills less than 1%. It's because most people recover from it. Well, how do you recover from it? Your immune system. How can we get our immune system stronger?
Vaccines.
Well, it turns out there's a bunch of proven methods: exercise,
Vaccines.
sunlight, vitamins,
Yeah.
water, healthy food. There's a bunch of different things you can do. Limiting stress, eliminating stress, or meditation, all sorts of different things you can do to strengthen your body, strengthen your immune system. Community. Turns out actually being around people that you love and care about is good for your immune system. It's good for your health. It's good for your mental health. All these things we denied people. It's so weird. It's like what we did is exacerbate the spread of the disease unintentionally in a lot of ways. With the lockdowns in California, like when you force people inside, a lot of times those people, they transmit it inside, unfortunately.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that with Canada's finally ramping up vaccinations. So my daughter just got her first shot, which is great. All her kids have their first dose, all her friends in school. So life's going to get back to normal. But I think that you see the toll that it's taken on kids being isolated, and it's hard to know what the long-term effects of that are going to be. Like it's going to take...
I'm hoping kids are generally resilient.
Yeah.
But I really wish there was more time spent about education about your immune system, and also, it's a long conversation about this, but
yeah. So the take-home message is try not to drink alone.
Yeah,
drinking alone is really unhealthy.
But what about if you're drinking alone because you're trying to achieve a certain result, like you're writing something?
Yeah, so that it's funny because I when I was writing the proposal for the book, I wrote like 10 versions of it, and it still sucked. And my agent, every time I'd send her the new version, she was like, "Yeah, no."
Really?
Yeah.
Got a good agent, huh?
She's good. She's this hard-bitten Manhattanite. She's like getting praise out of her is very difficult.
And what was wrong with it?
When it's finally good, she was like, okay.
What was wrong with it?
It didn't pop. It needed to pop. Like I had all the facts there. I had the ideas there. It just was boring. Like nothing drew you into it. And she was right. It didn't pop. And all of a sudden I realized, hey, you know what? I haven't written any of it drunk. I'm not taking my own advice. So in the book, I talk about all this evidence that, when we get to about 0.08 blood alcohol content, you're more creative. You're able to think.
That's when you shouldn't drive.
That's when you should, just about when you shouldn't drive is when you should write. because you're actually making connections. You're coherent enough that you can still do serious work, but the prefrontal cortex has just been turned down a couple notches so that you can start thinking laterally.
How do they know that it's 0.08? Why 0.08?
Well, I was quoting a study. So there's one study that was done where they got people drunk. So they got them. They were either doing placebos or alcoholic drinks, and they were trying to solve a lateral thinking task. So this one's called the remote associate test. So you get like 3 words that seem completely unrelated, and you have to come up with a 4th word that unites them all. And the thing about these lateral thinking tasks is you can't power through it. Like there's no way to like do an algorithm and figure it out. You just have to kind of relax and see the answer. And people who they seemed best at this task at about 0.08.
And there's a deterioration when it gets higher?
Yeah, it gets deterioration when you get higher. So there's a sweet spot. So it's funny because I gave a talk about, when I was doing the Try Not to Try book tour, I gave a talk about spontaneity and creativity and how they're linked. And I reported this study had just come out. And so I talked a little bit about how alcohol might be a shortcut to spontaneity and creativity. And after the talk was over, this was at a Google campus, this guy, his hand shot up and he was like, "Do you know about the Balmer Peak?" And I'd never heard of this thing, but this is almost certainly apocryphal, but supposedly Steve Ballmer, the former CEO of Microsoft, figured out that his coding ability peaked at this very particular blood alcohol content. So it's like not good, not good, not good, really good, really good, really bad.
That's amazing that it's coding.
Yeah. And so he kept himself hooked up to an IV to just be, it's almost certainly bullshit, but it captures this idea. Bullshit. I don't know. It captures this idea that alcohol is a tool that can help you solve creativity problems. And so they told me about the Balmer Peak. And then after the talk, they were going to take me on a campus tour. And they came up and they were like, "Okay, we know where we're taking you first." And they took me to their whiskey room. So they have this room that is just a wall of really good single malt scotches. It was actually amazing because I live in Canada now. I can't get anything in Canada.
Really?
So I was yeah, because everything's like 200% tax on alcohol, so everything's too expensive.
200% tax.
Basically, yeah.
What do you mean? So like if a whiskey bottle is $50,
so my favorite,
tax on that?
my standard whiskey is Lagavulin 16-year. And I can get that at K&L wine merchants in San Francisco, usually for like $70-$80 at US. And in Canada, it's more like closer to 200 Canadian. So,
really?
Yeah. So it's that. So anyway, I was salivating over the scotches they had. But what was important is that this is where they go. So they said that when they they're working on a problem, they run into a wall, they can't solve this problem. Instead of sitting there at their computers banging their heads against the wall, they stop, they go to the whiskey room. It's got beanbag chairs and a foosball table, and they drink some scotch, and they just shoot the shit. And they're like, "Well, what if we did this? What if we did that?" And they said often they come up with a solution. And so especially alcohol is really good at enhancing creativity in groups because it's making me more creative, so I'm thinking of more things. But I'm also the playground monitor is off duty. And so I'll say it to you out loud, even if I was sober, I might think it was stupid. Or I might be, this has happened to me in academic situations where we came up with this really multi-million-dollar grant to study the evolution of religion at UBC years and years ago. And I don't think it would have happened unless they had opened a pub. There's no place to drink on campus. And they finally opened this pub right near the bus loop. So after work on Fridays, me and a bunch of colleagues, all from different departments, would meet at this pub and there was no purpose. We were just drinking and shooting the shit. And this huge project came out of it because I think we were both individually more creative, but we were also disinhibited, and so we would say things that we would normally censor ourselves from saying. That might sound stupid, but then I'd say something that maybe was stupid, and then my colleague who does archaeology would be like, "Oh, you know what? Actually, that relates to this other thing that I know about." And then that relates to the thing that my colleague who does cultural evolutionary theory knows about. And it all kind of gels, but it wouldn't happen unless we slightly turned down the knob.
Right.
So I think it's the realization that really successful organizations like Google selectively use alcohol in the workplace in this way really lit a light bulb for me too. That was one of the motivations for writing the book as well.
That's interesting that they're so open-minded. They looked at it that way and chose that approach, because that's not just unconventional, but frowned upon in the work environment.
Yeah.
Because, you know, oftentimes we think of people drunk as being ridiculous, doing stupid things,
and we think about
chaos.
we think about lawsuits, right?
Oh yeah,
so
for
this
sure.
is the problem. Is like right now, part of the reason for me writing the book is trying to make the argument that alcohol is dangerous. There are all these bad things. There's addiction. It hurts your liver. It increases your cancer risk. It leads to sexual harassment and all sorts of problems.
Drunk
driving,
fights,
violence. So we know about all the costs. But unless we understand the functional benefits, on the other side, on the positive side, what is there?
Right. We have to look at it for what it really is, like everything else.
Yeah. So once we understand, so in addition to fun, we've got enhanced creativity, we have team building, we have trust building, we have all these things happening. So let's put some other things in the positive column. And it may be the case that you still look at it and you're like, nah, it's too risky. We're not going to do that.
Well,
but that's fine. At least
for
you're
some
making
people,
it.
right?
Yeah. And for some people it is. And the other thing we have to do, and this is crucial, is level the playing field for people who don't drink. And so and I talk about this in the last chapter, for all the positive functions of alcohol, there's always this dark side. So Dionysus has this dark side. So the god Dionysus, the god of wine in ancient Greece, could do all these great things for you, but he could also really fuck with you. So could give you a gift. He's the one who gave Midas the golden touch. So yeah, you want gold? Sure, everything you touch turns to gold. And then that didn't work out very well for Midas. So there's always like this danger.
Didn't he
attached
touch his
to
kids
it.
or something?
He
Whatever.
touched the woman he loved, and she turned
That's
gold, and he couldn't touch anyone anymore. And turned out it was a bad thing.
Isn't that Frozen? The movie Frozen?
Yeah, it's kind of like Frozen.
Touches everything.
So you want to bring up Frozen clip? No, all right.
They ripped that off.
So there's a dark side to Dionysus,
Yes.
right? And you need to see that, and you can't see it in its context without understanding the benefits. And so I think, in terms of do you have alcohol at professional events? Do you have it at academic events? Right now, the atmosphere in academia is so prohibitionist. It's just like, we can absolutely not have any alcohol. It's so dangerous.
When did that start?
I think it started with kind of people finally, it started for good reasons, right? It's people finally talking about all the abuse that happens.
Right.
And the unfairness of it. So a lot of work at conferences, for instance, really ends up it's not being done in the talks. It's being done at the end of the evening when people are at the hotel bar, they're down-regulating their PFCs, and they're talking freely about shit. So we're striking up new partnerships.
What is PFC?
They're prefrontal cortex.
Oh, okay.
So we're relaxed. We're talking about new stuff. I mentioned a postdoc opportunity that I have, and you're a grad student who's graduating recently, and you're going to need a job. All this great networking and creativity happens at the hotel bar, but it's mostly dudes doing it. And if you're a woman, you're not going to be super thrilled about hanging out at the hotel bar
With a
at
bunch of drunk
11
guys.
p.m. with a bunch of drunk guys.
Right.
And that means that you are now frozen out of everything that's happening there, right? You don't get that postdoc because the drunken PI offered it to somebody, after his fifth tequila, and you went home because you were uncomfortable. Or you went home because you're a recovering alcoholic and you don't drink. Or you went home because you have to get up early and pick the kids up from daycare. Whatever. You don't have time to. It's drinking around the bar late at night is a perfectly comfortable environment for white men, and especially white men who don't have full
Why white
childcare.
men?
I think because there's also, one of the things alcohol does is disinhibit you. And if you've got any prejudices, if you've got any kind of views about outside groups that you don't like, that's going to come out in drinking too. But mainly it's men. And it makes people who are not part of the in-group not only feel uncomfortable, but actually really genuinely disadvantaged because they lose out on
Well, because it
opportunities.
takes what is a working environment and turn it into a much more social environment, and then a much more uninhibited social environment that leads like to air quotes partying.
Yeah, no, some very bad stuff can happen. So
Right, but
so-
also very good stuff.
so
this
also
is
very
like
good
this
stuff. So
weird,
what do you do?
right? What do you do? Like, what's the solution?
I don't think there's a clear. So the one solution is ban it, which is the current, I think, answer in academia, and I don't think that's right. So I think what we need to do is figure out how to harness the positive functions of it while putting, kind of like bumper cars, like put on some barriers so that it doesn't get out of hand. So like simple stuff like limit. So it used to be the case that at receptions, at professional conferences, there were open bars. So you could just drink as much as you wanted at these receptions, and shit went south. Used to be.
Right.
And then it changed to where you had drink tickets.
But shit went south.
Yeah, shit went south. So good things happen, but really bad things happen really quick. And
Maybe
so,
there should be some way of stopping the really bad things from happening.
So drink tickets. So like limiting the number of drinks people can have, making water easily available. So even a simple thing, because sometimes you're talking to someone and you just want to be drinking something, right?
Right.
And so if all I have is that scotch next to me, I'm going to just drink some more scotch. If I also can pick up this water and drink the water, I will do that too. And so just simple things like making water available or non-alcoholic
Right,
drinks
but isn't the real
available.
problem personalities?
It's persons and situations, right?
Yes.
So personalities definitely play a role. I like to drink. I'm going to tend to drink more than most people. But also, if I'm in a situation where I have non-alcoholic options, the situation pushes my behavior in a different direction.
Right.
Or if I'm in a situation, if I'm in an open bar situation, I'll drink a lot. If it's 2 drink tickets and then I'm not allowed anymore, that puts a limit on me that I have. That's the situation helping me help myself.
Regulate.
Yeah, helping me regulate. Yeah, that's the way to put it.
It's funny because it's like it's such a human thing, right? Like a human issue, meaning that like there's a lot of human issues that they're so messy. There's no like clear binary 1 or 0. That's like there's so many of those things.
Yeah, so my goal in the book is just to lay out the complicated nature of it, right? Because right now it's just like alcohol is bad.
Right.
Let's get rid of it. And it's not that simple.
It's not, well, it's certainly not that simple if you have really good friends, right? Like I have a lot of good friends, and we like to get together and drink, and we have a great time.
Yeah.
Like I have a group of friends where on regular basis is that a word?
Basis.
On a regular
Yeah.
basis, we have a couple of drinks together and have tons of laughs, and
Yeah.
it's normal,
Yeah.
you know, and it's a standard thing.
And
But
it's-
if you get the wrong person in that mix, and we've
Yeah.
had a few of those guys,
Really?
the wrong person gets in that mix, and all of a sudden they have like shark eyes, and they go blank, and then next thing you know they're naked and sliding across the top of the bar, right?
Yeah. No,
You know that guy,
things
and
good.
that's
I
the
know that guy.
15% that you were talking
Yeah.
about.
Yeah. Or just, yeah.
I wish there was a way to tell, like if you had a turkey tester, you know those things that pop up, like
Don't
well,
give this guy more than 2
Bob's
drinks.
an
Yeah,
alcoholic.
Bob's an alcoholic.
I mean, alcoholism is such a strange term because, like, what is there a spectrum
There's a spectrum
of
Yeah.
alcoholism?
Yeah. So
is alcoholism like maybe you were in the wrong place and time in your life, and you were drinking to try to avoid all of the responsibilities that you had, and you called yourself an alcoholic, and now you've got your shit together with sobriety and discipline and positive mental attitude? And is there also someone who has some weird genetic disposition where they can't have a drink?
Yeah.
Like I have friends that I know that can't have 2 drinks.
Yeah.
They have 2
there's
drinks
there's
and
a
then
strong
no
genetic,
one's home.
There's a strong genetic component. So
Yeah.
the estimate is 60 to 70% is a genetic contribution. And so
Interesting.
then you need to really be careful.
Is there a gene we've isolated?
There's the literature on this is complicated. So there's some candidate genes, and some of them seem to have to do with regulating fear responses or pleasure responses. There's debate about this, but
I wonder if alcoholics, like straight up hardcore alcoholics, are better at certain tasks. I wonder if there's an evolutionary advantage to going shark eyes.
I think there has to be. You know, we talked about this kind of frequency dependent selection.
Uh-huh.
like, why are introverts allowed to exist? We're probably also about only 15% of the population.
Now,
why are
define
alcoholics still around?
introverts, because you and I have had an easy conversation the moment I met you.
Yeah. So
Like, you're not a rabid introvert to the point where
No.
you get really uncomfortable.
But after this conversation, I'm going to need to go back to my hotel and not talk to a single person for like a day. So I can
Really?
I can be.
This is hard?
No, it's not. It's wonderful. It's fun, but it takes energy out of me, and then I need to recover. But
Just talking to people, just talking to strangers?
No, so I don't have it like with my partner. I don't. It's not a drain.
I like how you
but-
call your girlfriend your partner.
Yeah, my girlfriend. I don't know. We're fucking 50
I
years
know,
old.
it's a funny
so
expression.
I could call her my girlfriend.
I
She's
remember
fucking 50
I
years
was
old.
listening to a comedian, this guy Richard Jenny, who's brilliant, who's he's dead now, but when he was in his 30s, he was talking about his girlfriend. And I remember I was in my 20s. Well,
Yeah.
is she a girl?
No, she's not a
She's
girl.
a woman.
So there's no good term. So
Right.
so what do you call
Partner's
her?
a weird one though.
Partner's
It's
a
like
weird.
you guys
but,
in business together. You know,
but what do
law
I
firm?
call her? My lover.
Yeah.
Or my friend. My lover.
That's kind of hot.
Nah, it's
My lover.
there's no good.
Say that with a wink, like this, like raise the eyebrows,
no
like
good
Groucho
word.
Marx.
We're
This is
old.
my
We're
lover.
middle-aged people, so she's not
My
my
special
girlfriend.
lady friend. How about that?
But we don't. She has introvertive tendencies, and we don't drain each other. But it's interesting. When I was a grad,
Well, you're intimate with each other. You know each other
Yeah,
very well, so
yeah.
you're comfortable around each
Yeah.
other.
yeah,
Yeah.
and my daughter doesn't. So with
Of course.
family,
But with me, I'm burning you out.
you're not right now. No, you really aren't. I
But
don't
you're-
notice it. I enjoy it. So it's kind of like waiting tables. So like when I was in grad school, especially once I got to a point where I wasn't taking classes anymore, my job, like when I was preparing for my comp exams, my job was to sit in my apartment alone and read things and take notes on them. For a year and a half, I did that. And even as an introvert, that's too much. And so I kept these, waiting tables and working in bars is how I put myself through end of undergrad and grad school. But I got to a certain point where I was making a lot more money doing translation. So I know Chinese, so I was translating Chinese to English, and that was much better money. But I kept like 3 waitering shifts a week because I needed to go out and do this kind of shit. Like I would banter with customers, I would have some drinks with my colleagues at the end of the day. So I need doses of it, but then I need to rest.
I was much more introverted when I was a kid. Much
Okay.
more so to the
Oh,
point
of
where
course, yeah.
when I was young, in my early 20s, and I'd have to go to the bank, I would get anxiety, like that I had to talk to the bank teller. Like I
Wow.
remember thinking that, like I would be super nervous waiting in line to talk to the bank teller, for no reason.
Yeah.
But it was because my interaction with people was pretty limited.
Okay. But your nature seems to be extroverted. Like you thrive off of talking to people and
I
hearing their
enjoy
stories.
talking to people because I find it to be extremely beneficial to my perspective. I'm a curious person.
You're a curious person. So when I'd heard of you, but I'd never seen one of your shows until my publicist booked me on the show, and then I started watching some shows.
And you're like, oh no.
It's funny. I was worried at first, and then as soon as I saw the first one, I was not, because, I talked about this idea of wu wei, right? Effortless action. The Chinese think that when you're in that state, you have this power that there's no good translation for it, and unfortunately in Mandarin it's pronounced "duh."
That's
no
hilarious. It's called duh.
Yeah, but it's I translate it as like charisma. So basically, when you're in the state of wu wei, people like you, and if you're a Confucian ruler, people defer to your authority and kind of want to follow you without you having to force them to. They admire you and they want you to like them and they want to do things for you. If you're a Taoist, so like for Zhuangzi, the effect of your duh is to relax other people around you. So you're super uptight, you come and interact with me. If I have duh, I relax you and you become more natural. You start being, hung up on the things you were hung up on. And they want that power, so that power is what allows you to be successful. And that's the tension, right? How do you get duh if you don't have it? And I was struck by the fact that you seem to have duh. Like you relax people and people will talk. And it's because of a kind of authenticity, right? You actually are genuinely, authentically interested in other people. And that's hard to fake.
I don't think you can fake
You
that.
can't fake it. And so people relax around it.
Well, this whole podcast came about because of genuine curiosity. There was no money in it when I first started doing it. And when I got to interview people, like Graham Hancock was one of my first guests, one of my first really interesting guests who I talked about earlier. And having people like that where I'd studied his work and read some of his books, and I got a chance to, all of a sudden I'm sitting down talking to this guy who I deeply admire, and I can just start asking him questions. And my whole life has been essentially completely non-conventional in terms of like my choices.
It seems like a series of
but it's all been authentic in that these are the things like you can't pretend to be interested in martial arts. You're either interested in it or you're not. You can't pretend to be interested in stand-up comedy. You're either interested in it or you're not in pursuit of it. You can't pretend to be interested in people. I'm curious about and sometimes it gets me in trouble because like people like assume that if I talk to someone who's like some hardcore right-wing person that I share their beliefs, but I'm curious.
You just want to know what
I want to know what they're thinking, and I think it's valuable to hear their voice, and I think it's dangerous to not hear their voice. I think we're in this weird polarizing time where people are scared to talk to someone who has differing opinions than they do because they're worried that people will conflate.
Their tribe is going to punish them.
But that is what happens, and it's because of social media and people without this core tenet of empathy, which I think is one of the most important things that we can have. And I think we should all like. Again, no one's perfect. I'm not perfect. I've fucked this up many times, but I think we should generally stray or lean towards empathy as much as we can. And so their empathy exists also in the context of understanding people's perspective in conversations. And when I'm talking to someone, I'm trying to draw out of them their thoughts because I want to examine them in terms of like, oh, okay, I see how he's framing this. Oh, I see her perspective. Like she's looking at it different than me. Like we were talking about earlier, we're very different. Like all of my choices, I know that all my choices are fucked up. Like if I was a different person and I said, okay, well, here's your life, here's your schedule. You have to commentate a cage fighting match, and then you have to go talk on stage in front of thousands of people, and then you have to do this podcast where you're speaking, about something you really don't even know what you're talking about, and you're asking questions to someone who is a doctor or a scientist or whatever.
But so it's clear that it works. Like because you're authentic, you send out in the book, I talk a little bit about these cooperation dilemmas that we have in life. So they go by different names. So prisoner's dilemma or public goods games or tragedy of the commons. There are a lot of these situations in life where the best payoff for me is to cooperate with you and for us both to work together. But I don't have a way of verifying that you're going to do the right thing. You could defect in economist language, and then I'm going to be really screwed. And so purely rational agents can't solve the prisoner's dilemma. Like they get stuck with a suboptimal outcome because they don't trust people. But normal humans solve prisoner's dilemmas all the time. And the way we do that is we trust people. And we trust people based on cues. So emotional signals, smiles. So, for instance, there's a difference between a so-called Duchenne smile. Is you're genuine when you're really amused. That's a Duchenne smile. And then there's the fake smile when you're kind of smiling for the camera or something.
Right, which is really disturbing to people.
It's really disturbing to people. They're totally different muscle systems. And
really?
One of them is controlled by the PFC, the deliberate one. Smile now.
Yeah.
It's time for you to nod and smile. That's your PFC doing it. And then if you say something really funny and I laugh, that's a different muscle system and it's not controlled consciously. And it's hard to fake. Actors can get good at faking Duchenne smiles. And so part of the story I'm telling is this evolutionary arms race. So people need to trust other people. And we developed this signaling system to do it. I can tell if you're authentic or not by your eyes and everything else. But then if you can fake that, Like if you can fake being trustworthy or being loyal and get all the benefits of that cooperation, but then as soon as the costs come for you, you're out of here.
Ugh.
That would be great for you. And
But it wouldn't be great for you.
it would be great for you if you're a defector who's in a minority in the culture. You could get a lot of benefits.
Yeah, but see, this is where I disagree, because I think the benefit is always camaraderie. And
But that's because you're sincere.
Yeah, but I also think that it's like people should understand this.
Yeah.
There's a deep benefit to real, genuine love and friendship.
But
And if you are somehow or another getting financial benefit or societal benefit or some sort of status benefit without the actual friendship aspect of it, like you miss the whole point. Like I had this conversation with a friend of mine the other day, a comedian friend of mine. We were talking about this comedian that threw another comedian under the bus. And I said, I feel bad for this guy because he's a comedian, but he doesn't have any comedian friends. And we were all talking about this in a group chat. We were saying, man, you missed half the fun. Yeah. Half the fun of being a stand-up comic is being friends with the funniest people on the earth. Like, I have group texts that if they ever got out, I have some fucking real explaining to do. Some of the people have said some horrible things to me, and we were laughing. But it's just comedians understand each other, and to be one of us and to be without any real sincere friendships within this group is crazy.
Right, but that's because just put on your evolutionary goggles for a second. So like put aside the way you feel, which is because you're a sincere human being and you're authentic, you feel like this. But imagine there was Joe Prime, who's just like you in every way, but you're faking it all. There are ways in which you would do well in a population that was full of cooperators. And so the upshot is just there's a danger of Joe Primes faking it.
I understand, but I don't think it works in this setting.
Yeah.
This is my point, is that this is 1,665th? 63rd? 1,663rd podcast, not including fight companions and MMA shows. Yeah. There's more than 100... How many MMA shows? 111 MMA shows.
That's impressive.
A ton of fight companions. Yeah. You can't fake that much,
no, you
man.
Can't fake that shit.
People will figure out your weirdness, right?
And they'll figure it out faster if you're drinking together. And so this is one of the...
Or if you're high.
Or if you're high.
Is the most.
Yeah.
That's the most, because that just like strips
paralyzes your prefrontal cortex.
But this thing of being genuine it's not... If you're not genuine and you're benefiting, you're not benefiting. You're fucking up. You're missing the whole thing. The whole thing, it's like being in a loving relationship where you hope the person dies. Like, what are you doing? You're supposed to hope that person feels great. Yeah. You want people to feel great because then you feel great. We're all connected, whether we agree or not, whether we look at it correctly or not. Like all the information points, all the evidence points to the fact that we're all connected. And then when you have like genuine, loving friendships, they're super beneficial for you. Yeah. They're good for you too. Yeah. They're not just good for the other person. They're good for you. When that person's doing great, it's actually good for you. When you're genuinely happy for your friends, it's actually mutually beneficial.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I totally
You miss
agree.
all that.
You miss all
if
that.
you're this actor who's faking it.
Yeah.
So when you're saying that they get all the benefit, I say they don't. Because I say they're this sad, lonely person with all this financial success, but they don't have all the real success, which is camaraderie.
Right, but you care about that because you're a human and you're not your genes. So from a genes perspective, so
just in terms of transmitting those
genes, producing a miserable psychopath who's never happy is fine. Like genes don't care about that. So this is why cultures have to worry about the sociopaths, right? They are going to take advantage of this. And so in this, so there's kind of arms race. So the fact that I can tell at an instant if you're interested in what I'm saying, if you're getting bored, if we need to stop soon, I can figure that out just from looking at your face. that would seem like magic to a chimpanzee. Like it seems like telepathy. The way I can read your mind from facial expressions is amazing, and I'm actually not that good at it.
But don't you think dogs have a little bit of that?
Dogs
in
have
them?
it too because they've co-evolved with humans.
Yeah.
So they're constantly worried about human intentional states. And so part of my point in the book is we're the end products of this evolutionary arms race. Basically between sociopaths and normal people like us. We want to be able to pick out sociopaths. They want to be able to pass for normal people.
So you've taken it down to this reductionist perspective where you're looking at, not saying you in your personal life, but looking at it as a scientist.
As a scientist, I look at it.
You're looking at it as these traits, they exist in order for people to more successfully transmit their genes or transfer their genes.
Yeah. So it's a weird mindset because as a scientist, I think that. As a human, I like hanging out and talking to you.
Right.
I it's the same thing with parental care. So as a scientist, the reason that I love my daughter is because she's carrying half my genes. That's why parental love is implanted in me by my genes. And yet if I really thought that consciously, I'd be weird, right? I love my daughter because I love my daughter. It's just, it's spontaneous, it's natural, it's part of just being a normal human being.
Yeah, but I don't buy that. Because my daughter has a little tiny chihuahua, and I love him.
Yeah.
Why do I love him? He's not carrying on my genes.
Your genes are tricking you. I mean, so genes
is
don't
that
care.
What it is, or is it just love?
No, it's love, but so genes are happy with mistakes. They're willing to tolerate masturbation, and they're willing to tolerate adoptive parents loving their kids as much as biological parents do.
And even puppies.
Because puppies look like kids, right? So I have a dog. I love my dog. And my dog, again, I genuinely love my dog. Like when he is distressed, I feel distressed.
When is your dog distressed?
We didn't brush him very well during COVID, and he's a poodle, like a miniature poodle mix, and we had to shave him down.
And he freaked out?
No, he was just cold as shit. So he was shivering all the time.
Vancouver,
and just
cold and rainy.
Vancouver is cold and rainy, and I just felt so bad for it. We got him a sweater that's quite attractive, actually. He looks handsome in it. But so I feel genuine distress when he's distressed, and so that's my proximate psychology. That's like me as a person. But I can always step back from that and as a scientist say, well, why would I feel that way? And I'm aware that it's my genes tricking me. Like it's me feeling parental feelings toward. And it's why we love kids. Like I have a view of this park where I live in Vancouver. And my favorite part of the day is when there's an elementary school in the park. And like 4 or 5 times a day, kids, I guess they must do their PE out in the park. So they all go out in the park and they run around. And I'm up on the 39th floor, so they're kind of small. So it's almost like Brownian motion, like watching molecules bounce around. I can hear them. You can't really see individuals. But the motion of kids on a playground is so satisfying. There's like something beautiful about it.
Right, just pure joy.
Just pure joy.
Yeah. They're so free in so many ways. They don't have responsibilities. They don't have, and here's the thing: like people think that once you get wealthy, that you can kind of have that same childlike joy because you don't have any responsibilities anymore, or you don't have any worries in terms of paying your bills. But that's nonsense.
Yeah,
it doesn't exist. It only exists in children, and in people on ecstasy.
And that's because you're chemically making yourself a child again, right?
Yeah, in some ways. Yeah.
So that desire, and there's also, it's not just joy, but there's a feeling of wanting to protect that. Right. You ever read Catcher in the Rye?
Yeah, but I haven't since like high school.
But that, he wants to be a catcher in the rye where he's like protecting these kids playing in the field and making sure they don't run off the cliff. And, that feeling of caring for all kids. Like I see kids in the airport. So my daughter's 14 now, and she's now a quasi grown up. And we have a very different relationship now because she's still a kid in some ways, but she is negotiating being an independent person, right? And not being my kid anymore and having independent relationships. And I do kind of miss when she was 5, and it was just, I was her world. And so that intense feeling of like loving kids and kind of appreciating kids having fun, you can experience it as a human, but the power of thinking scientifically is you can also abstract from it and understand where it came from.
Yeah.
And then that gives you some understanding of how it can go wrong in some people, what the barriers are to it in some people. So that's in the book, what I'm trying to do is, let's say we like to drink. Drinking makes us feel good. We like to hang out with friends and drink. Let's abstract away from that, which we all know, and think about scientifically, why would we want to do that? And getting a scientific understanding of why we would want to do that then gives us the power to make better decisions, because then we understand, should we keep alcohol at public events, professional events? Maybe we should, because, within limits, it has certain functions. So I think putting on evolutionary or scientific spectacles to look at human behavior is valuable.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think we should strive to experience things that exist outside the common plane of existence, whatever they are.
Okay.
I think the common drone of, unfortunately, most people's lives in society, because of the fact that most people are doing something that they probably wouldn't do if they weren't getting paid, and they're stuck in traffic, and they're on their way to an office where they have to deal with office politics, and maybe they have a boss that's not so thankful and appreciative, and they have colleagues they don't necessarily enjoy working with. There's all these things that exist that are this common plane, the common plane of existence. When you get hammered with some good friends, you jolt outside of that common plane, and it gives you a little bit of perspective. And maybe you're sitting outside that bar, and it's 2:00 in the morning. You go to get some pizza with your friends, and you're sitting there eating, and you go, you know what? I'm gonna fucking quit this job.
Yeah.
I'm done.
Yeah.
And you go, like, serious, Tom? Like, dude, I'm gonna quit this fucking job. I'm done. You know what I need to do? I need to save $20,000. If I can save $20,000, that can keep me going for 5 months. I need 5 months to get this shit going. And this is what you need. You need those moments in life. And maybe you get that from running a triathlon. Maybe you do that. Maybe you get it from
doing
a yoga retreat,
or something,
whatever the fuck it is. But something that takes you outside that common plane.
Yeah.
And I think I've been very, very, very lucky that my interests all lie outside the common plane.
Yeah.
But that's just dumb luck and fortune, and the fact that I found myself in the right place and time.
But it's also because you pursue what you love. So it's not pure dumb luck.
But it was
right?
dumb
You're
luck
drawn
because I
to
started doing it when I was young.
Yeah.
I started pursuing what I loved when I was 15.
Did I. Yeah, I guess I had a lot of luck too. So
There's, for sure there's fortune involved in this, right? And I used to deny that too, and I think that's very unhealthy to deny fortune. Obviously, there's like so many things could have gone wrong, and they do go wrong with people all the time, where health things, circumstance,
or just random shit.
Random
so like
things.
the philosopher Martha Nussbaum has a book on what she calls moral luck, and is trying to point out that a lot of our well-being, we have to recognize the extent to which our well-being depends on luck. And if we can do that, it enhances humility in a variety of ways. So,
yes,
I went out, I used to, in San Francisco, I would drink. I worked in this nightclub. I would drink all night, sometimes do hallucinogens. And then I would go joyride my motorcycle downtown because I like going up the really steep hills and going down the other side. It's so fucking stupid. It's so stupid. I didn't die, right? And so I'm lucky. That's
a funny kind of luck.
It's got to be the case that you and I have both driven. I guarantee you at some point in our lives, you and I have both been driving at over 0.08, right? And we didn't hit and kill someone. And other people, maybe they only did it once in their life, and then they hit and killed someone and their life is ruined. So there's all these ways in which we were also born into a certain society where we had certain benefits and privileges. So I think that understanding privilege and luck is important for being humble and realizing that you didn't just do it because you pulled yourself up by your bootstraps.
Yeah. It is very, very important, but it also can be weaponized against you.
Sure,
That's a problem as well, because then you get involved with grifters
Yeah.
who want to, punish you for luck. I
Yeah.
think that you should be humble whenever possible and understand that you're extremely fortunate just to be alive in 2021, especially to be alive and to be living in North America, especially to be alive to be living in what is essentially the 1% of the population on Earth if you make more than $34,000 a year.
Yeah.
I mean, that's hard for people to wrap their heads around, but that's the real 1%. When people want to talk about the 1%,
Yeah.
you make $34,000 a year. You are in America, where we are right now, you make more money than most of the people alive.
Yeah.
99% of the people alive are doing worse off than you, which is really interesting because people love to use that term, the 1%. And it's because fortune is relative.
Yeah.
If we look at someone like Jeff Bezos, we're like, bro, I wish I was that guy. And you
Yeah.
look at the person you're talking to, like, hey, man, you make $75,000 a
Yeah,
year.
it's crazy.
You know how
amount of
crazy
money.
you are to
Yeah.
say that you wish you were that guy? Like, you're all right, man. If you budget, you're doing pretty good.
Well, this is a problem with humans. It's called the hedonic treadmill. So we have this built-in. We're built to be dissatisfied. This is a good example of how our interests and our genes' interests diverge. So our genes actually don't want us to be happy and just give up and kind of relax. They want us to be striving.
Right.
And so anything that's pleasurable becomes less pleasurable after a while. I got used to, when I was a grad student, I couldn't afford very good wine. So I kind of got good at enjoying whatever. Trader Joe's, like a good deal from Trader Joe's. And then I became a professor. I had more money. I could afford better wine. Then I habituated on that better wine. And then if I was at a party and someone served me Trader Joe's $2 Chuck, I'd be like, And it's the same. But I enjoyed $2 Chuck back then as much as I enjoyed this better wine now. Probably.
You just adjusted.
You adjust, right?
Yeah.
And so you're constantly adjusting your expectations to match your resources. And this makes, if I were my genes, I would make me that way too, because it keeps me striving and trying to get more stuff. But as a human, it sucks. And so a lot of the religious traditions of the world are focused on trying to get us out of that hamster wheel of always pursuing the next thing and learning how to actually just realize the value of what you have right now.
Well, that is the thing that people always pose, the question people always pose about someone like a Bill Gates. Like, what keeps that guy working? Like, why would he keep working when you have so much money? There's no way you could possibly spend it all.
Yeah.
Because it's not really what it is. It's this strange game.
You're internally motivated, right?
Yeah. And there's an odd game. And in his defense, he's turned a lot of it towards philanthropy, but there's this weird game of acquiring currency.
Yeah.
And that's the game you played your whole life.
And we're built that way.
Yeah.
And there's good evidence that it's your absolute wealth doesn't matter. It's your relative wealth.
Yeah.
And so you could, whatever, you're making 34,000, you're in the top 1%. But if everyone around you is making 100,000, you feel like shit.
Right. But if you're living in a place where very few people have any money, but everyone has enough to eat, you'd be amazed at how happy everybody is.
Yeah.
Right. It's and the amount of stress that we take on in keeping up with the Joneses versus the amount of pleasure that you get from the actual benefit of the success. Boy, if you could look at it on a graph, you'd probably be like, this is terrible.
Yeah. And so this may be, I think this is, as you mentioned, like this is one of the functions of intoxicants, right?
Yeah.
It breaks you, you're on a hamster wheel.
Mm-hmm.
And your PFC is keeping you on, your prefrontal cortex is keeping you on that hamster wheel. It's like, because it's about goal fulfillment, right? Here's our goal. Let's be self-controlled. Let's get that goal. So the PFC is keeping you on the hamster wheel. Intoxicants momentarily pop you off the hamster wheel.
Yeah.
You get drunk with your friends. You start to look at your life in a different way. And you're like, you know what? Actually, I fucking hate my job. And your friends are like, yeah, your job sucks. You should hate your job.
Yeah.
You're miserable. We've seen you since high school. You've gotten more and more unhappy. You should quit your job. Like that conversation, that's people, especially good friends in a community, helping you to get off the hamster wheel. That's not going to happen drinking coffee.
No.
So that's what the job of these substances here, partly, I mean, it's got a lot of functions, but one function for individuals, I think, is helping to pop you off the hamster wheel for long enough that you get some perspective on, do I really want to do this?
But like many other tools, there's inherent dangers involved. And if you want to use a bandsaw, you might cut off one of your fingers.
Yeah.
Or you might build a house.
You might build a house. And
Yeah.
building a house without a bandsaw would suck. It'd take a really long time, right?
Exactly.
So
That's a great way to look
we
at
need the
it.
tools.
Yeah.
So,
Dude, I think we should wrap it up with that. That's a
Yeah.
perfect way to describe it. Hey, man, I really enjoyed this conversation.
a lot
I
of
really,
fun.
really did. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry you're going to be tired for a day.
I'll recover. I got time. Yeah, I got some downtime.
And your book
built in.
is, it's Drunk. It's available right now.
It's available
Did you do
right
the
now.
audio?
No, my good friend Jordan did, though.
Oh, as long as it's a
someone I
friend.
trust, yeah.
I fucking hate when authors don't do it,
No.
but as long as it's a good
Oh,
friend.
God, no. Someone I didn't know did my first book audio, and it's, like, painful listening to that. But, no, my good friend Jordan did it.
All right, beautiful. Do you have social media?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter.
What is it?
At Slingerland20 on Twitter.
What is it?
At Slingerland20 on
Slaterland 20?
Slingerland. 20.
Slingerland 20.
Yeah.
Oh, your name. Duh.
Yeah, basically, people could just go edwardslingerland.com.
Listen to the way you say it, though. You hear the way he's saying it? He's saying like Slingerland.
He says it faster than he said
I
it a lot
say
of
it
times.
faster than I've
You
had.
confuse the shit out of
How
people.
many Buffalo Traces
Two.
in there am I?
We've had
Yeah,
two
all right.
drinks.
So yeah, Edward Slingerland, one word.
Slingerland.
No,
Spell it out.
I'm from Jersey. We just make
I'm from
everything.
Jersey too, man.
We make everything short. How do you say drawer?
Drawer.
I say draw.
Well, listen, I was born in Jersey, but
Okay.
I lived there till I was 7. There
All
it
right.
is. Great
Yeah.
cover, by the way.
Yeah, it's a good cover.
All right.
So yeah.
Slingerland.
Okay, I'll fucking enunciate the whole thing. EdwardSlingerland.com is my website.
I really
yeah.
enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, this was
Thank
fun,
you very
man.
much. Go get that book, fuckers. Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks.